Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. Good morning, Mr. Mokryski. Good morning. Council Davies, Council Bovet.
Good morning.
Full table. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
Not from staff,
From staff?
but we did have a request from Commissioner Farr.
Yes, we have a request to remove items 6B1 and 6B2 from the consent calendar, and I believe Ms. Gebb has anticipated we'll have a discussion immediately following the consent calendar about those two items, which I'm happy to lead if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bovet. Any emergency business?
No.
Okay, on to county administration and a public hearing order and resolution. We have Ms. Moody coming to the table. It's all yours.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, so this is a supplemental number 3 budget. We do have a public hearing this morning because we have some funds changing by more than 10%, but I'll go ahead and give you a summary. So this is timed to adjust our current year budget as we go into the budget process. Very soon, you'll be going into the 26-27 budget committee process. We'll have a proposed document that's printed, and we, as we're building the 26-27, we see things in 25-26 that need adjusted. So wanting those budgets when they're side by side in a document to make the most sense to the public. Some highlights for you. The memo does go through each fund and what's changing in each fund, but some highlights for you are Admin Pro and 626 collective bargaining agreements were recently completed, and so those financial changes are happening in the funds that those employees are located in. There's project timing occurring in several different funds, some in the capital fund or things with parks, which might be shifting between the fiscal years. We start to see what those timelines look like as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. The one I will mention that's the largest is the clean lane bond assumption is in the current year budget. That is being removed from the current year budget. And so that is a $35 million change. And I mention that because of its size, because that results in the entire change of supplemental 3 being a negative about $24 million for the county budget. So we also have just revenue and expenses, like I mentioned. We're looking at the 26-27 budget closer as we develop it, and then 25-26 and changing it. So in various places, you'll see adjustments with current information. Within Health and Human Services, there is the elimination of about 15 FTE related to the lane care changes there with Pacific Source that the board has heard about. So changing, not having county employees, so FTE being removed from the budget. And then the purchase of 99 East Broadway, which was previously approved by the board. This contains the movement of reserves in order to actually make the purchase. FTE is going down 13.2 across all of our funds. That's the net change with some reductions, like I mentioned, and then some small adds or movements. That is the summary.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294.471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes was published as detailed in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in this agenda item. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the supplemental budget. Okay, at this point, we will open the public hearing. Do we have anybody, Rio? We have one person online. Ms. Gebb, if you would like to see if they're here to talk about the supplemental budget.
Thank you, Chair. For those joining us online, if you would like to give testimony for this public hearing, please raise your virtual hand now. No hands raised. Chairs, return it to you.
Okay, well, we will close the public hearing at this point and ask staff if they have any additional comments.
No additional comments from staff.
Okay, anything from the board? Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Just a quick question, Ms. Moody. Just for the record, when you say that these changes in total reflect a 13.2% reduction in FTE, is that 13.2 FTE or percentage? You said across departments, just for clarification.
Yeah, not percentage, 13.2 FTE.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? Ready for motion?
Very good. I'll move approval of the public hearing, order, and resolution for 26-04-07-01 as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion made to approve public hearing order and resolution 26040701 in the matter of adopting the fiscal year 25-26 supplemental budget number 3, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations by Vice Chair, and seconded by Commissioner Lovell. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Moody. Okay, on next, I believe this is going to be your show, Mr. Mokrycki, employee
Chair.
recognition.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. You know, we're always pleased to recognize employees, and usually we are able to recognize teams of employees, and today's no exception to that because most of our best work happens within teams. And we have a great group of folks between engineering and construction services, our utility permit team, transportation planning, and then in our technology services department that provided some support for this effort. So I want to invite Sasha Vartanian and Jim Franklin up here. And we have some other folks I'm going to call out. So y'all know Sasha Vartanian, our division manager for construction and engineering services and public works. Jim Franklin is our right-of-way permitting supervisor, and Jim was really the lead in coordinating this project effort. We also have Lori Parker, who I believe is with us virtually, although may not have a camera on. She's our engineering systems specialist. John Elliott, Engineering Tech 2. John is not able to be here with us today. Becky Taylor is also not able to be with us. She's our senior transportation planner in transportation planning. And then Nick Riolo, a business analyst in technology services. Nick is here. And Heidi Binder-Vitti, a senior programmer and systems analyst in technology services. So that's the team that comprises this utility permit, this group that put together this project. So we're recognizing this group in engineering and construction services, and transportation planning and technology services for their work to design and implement a new utility permit process following changes to state law. It was a detailed process that took approximately 3 months and was completed at the same time that they maintained their regular duties. So a utility permit is required for any work that's performed in our right-of-way. Permits ensure that work is performed safely and meets county standards, such as proper traffic control during the work and leaving the roadway in good condition to avoid future maintenance and erosion issues. I think Sasha can probably share with you some photos if you're interested, examples of where right-of-way is not left in that condition, in the past has not been left in that condition, and it's really problematic. Areas that can flood and cause really a lot of challenges in our roadways and for our residents. And prior to Senate Bill 1566 in 2024, that was passed in 2024, unlike cities, our city partners and the Oregon Department of Transportation, counties had no way to recoup the cost of staff time spent issuing and inspecting utility permits. The change in state law allowed us to update our permit process and to create a new mechanism to collect reasonable permit fees to help offset the cost to issue the permits and to manage the work and make sure that our right-of-ways are left in reasonable condition for us to maintain. So this interdepartmental team worked to create new county policy on permitting, implement the fee, improve customer experience, and create internal process efficiencies. They enhanced and updated the utility permitting processes by implementing a new online permit application form, facilitating online self-reporting, and elevating the overall permitting experience for users. In 2025, the total number of utility permits issued by Lane County achieved a record high, surpassing 760 permits. with the new changes to state law and the work of this team generating roughly $150,000, which offsets part of the utility permit program costs on the road fund. Typically, this is utility companies or developers that are doing this work in our right-of-way. And it's just great work. It's, you know, this is a great example of where we needed the state to allow us to do this. And then our team was able to rapidly work in collaboration to develop a process that is both easy for our stakeholders that are engaging in this work to complete the permit and pay the fee, and also maintains accountability for Lane County as a public agency and ensuring that our right-of-ways are maintained. So great work by this team, and we're recognizing them today for their focus on solutions. And I want to ask Sasha Vartanian if you have any additional comments you'd like to make.
Thank you. Chair Senega, Commissioners, I just have a few remarks. So today's recognition speaks to more than a successful implementation. It reflects the county's ability to be the first county in the state of Oregon to implement the utility permit processing fee and to do it in a way that modernizes how we serve utility partners, transforming an entire permitting system in a matter of months. I want to especially recognize Jim Franklin, whose leadership anchored this effort from day one. Jim brought clear, forward-looking vision for what a modern utility permitting system should be: transparent, predictable, and customer-friendly. Jim used his 20-plus years of experience to anticipate challenges before they materialized, whether related to application flow, or inspection logistics. His ability to see both the big picture and the granular details ensured the process launched smoothly and continues to perform reliably under a record workload. While Jim provided the overarching framework, this work succeeded because of exceptional collaboration across multiple work groups and departments. Becky Taylor played a central role in building relationships with other counties, navigating Senate Bill 1566. Her policy expertise and ability to translate legislative intent into practical implementation steps ensured the county's approach was both compliant and defensible. Nick and Heidi transformed complex operational requirements into a functional, intuitive online permit form. Their work made it possible for users to self-report and submit applications with far greater efficiency. Lori Parker is the face of the permitting process for many utility providers. Her engagement with applicants, coupled with fee collection and consistent communications, ensured that the transition to the new system felt smooth and supportive. And John Elliott's inspection capacity and field expertise was essential in keeping pace with the workload. Lane County is now helping shape statewide understanding of Senate Bill 1566 benefits, setting the standard for other counties to follow. So this team's success demonstrates what can be accomplished when technical expertise, policy knowledge, field expertise, and customer service come together with a shared purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll turn it over to you, unless there's anything you'd like to say in addition to that, Jim.
The only thing is it's a very exciting time to bring forward this kind of new thought process and efficiency for the community and for Lane County.
Thanks for all your work, Chair.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. To the board. Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, thank you, Jim and the team, and Sasha, you guys run a really tight ship, and it's going in the right direction, apparently, so thank you for doing that. You know, that kind of work for right-of-way stuff's not glamorous. People aren't going to praise you for building houses and making subdivisions and all that, but it's necessary work, and it has to happen in a very, I guess, lack of a better word, you know, in a certain order, in a certain way. There's a very tight, narrow window of how you have to operate, and to make that more efficiency is an added plus, especially under a heavy workload, like they said. So good job to all the team, and for those that continue to make things better and make things easier for us to develop a community so that we can attract more business. So good on you. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. You know what, I like to pick people's words to say out of my mouth because people say things better than I can say things quite often. And Jim, I'm going to use your words. It is an exciting time to ... develop efficiency. It is an exciting time to do so, particularly in light of the fact that we are falling behind so quickly every year on how many houses we need, how many front doors we need. We're not going to catch up without more efficiency. This is a hallmark of such efficiency. Thank you very much to this entire team for making it easy for people to get into houses, among other things. But to me, that's a double underlined positive. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. Well, as always, particularly when we have teams come before us whose work is really invisible, particularly to us here at the board, I'm really appreciative and glad to the administrator and department leadership for elevating this so that we and the public can see the work that goes unseen so much of the time. But I also want to just note that this is another really important example as we head into budget season about how often our challenges are that we're committed to providing good public service and to being good partners with our other municipalities and public jurisdictions, but our hands are often tied in doing the best work we know we need to do for Lane County residents because of state legislation or ORS that impedes our ability to do so. So this is another example of a way that we were able to and I assume the Association of Oregon Counties is excited about this as well and was probably taking a pretty big role in ensuring this legislation happened to free counties up to do exactly this kind of program because it's just so important for the public to understand that often we have ideas of how we could generate revenue and we're prohibited from doing it because of laws and rules from the legislative branch or from the federal government. So thank you for your leadership. I love it when Lane County's first and gets to set the bar and make the example for other counties to follow. I imagine other counties are going to be on the phone to you soon to ask how you did it, and I know we're always happy to share. So thank you so much for the great work.
Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you to the whole team for working so quickly in implementing this. From what you described, this was 760 permits in 1 year, and that generated $150,000 in revenue that we otherwise would not get. But we used to be doing the work and not recouping the fee. And I think that's where the crux of efficiency and implementation that was so timely by the team, it means so much to the county because as my colleagues have mentioned, we are obligated to do certain work on behalf of the state, but we don't always get that funding in order to cover those services. And this is a perfect example of us doing the work, but just not getting paid for it until this change at the state level occurred and the implementation happened so quickly. So thank you for recovering money to the residents of Lane County in this transition. And thank you for making it so customer friendly. We often hear people who are not so happy about what's going on necessarily in land management, but this is a prime example of us doing it right, and it deserves to be appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, all of these things. And there was, I recall when we were talking about implementing this and it was coming forward, there was some angst amongst different contractors and things. And you guys have done such a great job, the whole team. I mean, 760 permits the first years, that's a good number. And they've gone out so smooth, now people aren't nervous to wait for permits because they know they're going to get them right away, which stops people from doing things in our right-of-ways illegally. So just thanks to everyone. This is a big deal, and yeah, take the wins when we can get them. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, next up, we have public comment. Speakers will be taken in the order in which they sign up and will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. Your time will start when you come to the dais and give us your name. Thank you, Rio. And then first up, we have DJ Kelly Quattrochi.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. As was said, my name is DJ Kelly Quattrochi. I'm a resident of District 4. I am a previous Equity Access and Advisory Board Chair and systems consultant here in town, and I'm here to just talk about my support for the Equity Program and what they're presenting later this morning. I was thankfully part of the team that was actually able to help them do their work initially as they rebrought up their equity board from a couple-year hiatus. I'm impressed by the EPAB, or the Equity Program Advisory Board's changes that allowed individuals to actually attend initial meetings and then really engage in the process of what it means to be on a board and a commission. There were some pretty, I think, fundamental changes in the way that we looked at how the work was being done that allowed people who have never really been able to or felt that we were not able to actually be involved in ways that were meaningful. I have had the joy of meeting the first cohort when they first started, and then about a year later, re-meeting some of them and seeing the changes that they have undergone in their own confidence and understanding of what it means to be on a county board, looking at other places that they are going to be involved in, is exactly what the EPAB was trying to do for them. And that's, I think, a pivotal change in some of the ways that we look at what boards do. Not only what are we getting, or you all getting, from participant involvement, but how are they changing and developing as well? I want to say that the equity program's focus on fostering equity through civic engagement works. Their care in the recruitment process, the selection, and intentional individual development allows for anyone, not only people who are experienced, to see themselves in this work, see how they can make their community a better place, and be supported and encouraged through that process. I know that they're going to be making some recommendations about how this can be implemented for other boards and commissions across Lane County, and I would encourage you all to listen deeply to that and heed those recommendations, because we've seen it be successful in one area, so we might as well do it for all of our areas and ensure that we can help elevate our community together. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Bill Cluse.
Commissioners, I'm Bill Close, 375 West 4th Avenue, Suite 204 in Eugene. Yesterday, I sent you all late in the day a 1-minute public comment. It went out late, so I'm going to take 2 minutes and summarize my 1-minute email to you. I'm asking that you elect to hear the McCann appeal on item 6B in today's agenda. Both of those items really deserve to be heard by the board. 6B to McCann is particularly important to me. In the staff report to the hearings official on McCann, the staff urged the hearings official to find that the big game policy, Policy 11, does apply on EFU land, even though you tentatively decided that it does not apply on forest land. The staff report, May 21st of 2025, said the board is not likely to make a final decision on the matter within the timeline constraints of this application. And besides, the board policy for forest template dwellings in the F2 zone might not be directly applicable to non-farm dwellings in the E30 zone. The hearings official followed through on the staff advice. He said, it is not clear that the BOC has finalized its interpretation. If appropriate, the BOC itself can decide whether a similar interpretation of the policy outside of the forest template dwelling context has merit. Well, staff is advising that you not do that, that you just simply affirm the hearings official decision. So the gist of my question to you today is, why hasn't the board made a final decision on Policy 11 and big game yet? This board reviewed my findings on December 17th, 2024. Not 2025, 2024. and tentatively agreed on the meaning of Policy 11. Staff has had my other findings for a year now. They are redlining my proposed findings. I am still waiting for their red line review of my findings on 2 of the 3 King dwellings. Someone at LMD is slow walking my findings. That prevents you from making a final decision on the King applications. That lets the staff tell the hearings official this issue is still up in the air. That lets the hearings official say that minimum lot size for elk does apply on EFU land when you have told them.
Thank you for your public comment.
Yes.
Thank you for your public comment. That's been 3
Oh my
minutes.
goodness, where's
Yeah.
the time going? You're having such a good time. I'm so sorry. So I fully support you hearing that appeal. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. Next up, we have Lee Takoyer. Takoyer? Tachwa. It's French. Thank you, Lee. Tachwa.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Lee Tashwa, and I'm here to voice my support of the recommendations being presented today by the Equity Program. Last year, I had the pleasure of interning with the Equity Program to assist them with this board assignment and their other projects about improving civic spaces. And you all may remember me running around this building for quite a while. So with that in mind, I'd like to focus my testimony today with a quick story about myself. Before my internship, I was a really shy person. Granted, I still might be with how nervous I sound right now, but before I was a person who always did just enough to pass by. Even after entering graduate school here from out of state, I always kept my head down. I went to class, did my work, and left. I rarely spoke up in class, and even more rarely went above and beyond. As lackluster and as embarrassing as that is to say, that's pretty much who I was. My point here is that this sort of participation and engagement, speaking in front of you all today, was never something I would have done before. Through my internship, I was able to learn more about county efforts, grow more confident in myself, and most importantly, gain the feel empowered to continue on in this field. Because of this positive experience, I'm proud to say that I went on to join a Lane County Advisory Board myself, focusing on a topic that I'm passionate about, which just so happens to be transportation equity, to keep with the equity theme. My experience is just one example of what's possible, and the recommendations before you would ensure that more people in our community have access to the same kind of experience in our civic spaces that I had. So again, I urge you to implement the recommendations given by the Equity Program, and at the very least, know that my story is tangible evidence that the equity work being done here is important and does indeed yield results. And that's why I'm able to speak out today and advocate for what I believe in. So that's it for me. So thank you for your time and your service to the community.
Next up, we have Ruben Garcia.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your time. I'm Ruben Garcia. I'm a retired businessman, so I just wanted to talk to you about a few things. One is reputation, legacy, and behavior. So first of all, I think my comments mostly addressed to Heather and Lori and Pat, especially Pat. You know, you're such a you've contributed so much to this community, and you have a wonderful reputation. But I think the clean lane and also the 30% increase that you guys voted in a couple years ago was, I just found out about it like 4 months ago, and I was shocked. I mean, in this community in Lane County, people are lucky they got 4 or 5% increase, but you voted in a 30% increase. That was nuts. Regards to clean lane, once the public kind of snips out the high rates they're going to be paying for trash removal, and also the taxes and fees, they're going to be knocking at your door big time. So I hope you can work a miracle and reverse this. Don't wait for any changes in the county commissioners, and just turn it around. Make a miracle, change it, because people are not going to be happy with high fees and taxes. And then in regards to behavior, Lori, I'm a little late on this. Looks like I know that the ship left the harbor already with clean lane, et cetera. But I was out here, Lori, several weeks ago, and I just went to greet you, just to say hello. And, you know, typically, sometimes we just touch people on the side of the shoulder, and that's all he did. But you just blew up at me. You just started screaming at me, "Don't you touch me, don't you ever touch me." And I'm like, what the heck? And I backed up, and I put a hand out, and then you just angrily shook my hand. What did I do to deserve that, Lori? I mean, I was out in the lobby here. There was people here. It was embarrassing. And I can't think of anything that I did to deserve that kind of behavior. You should never treat someone in the public like that, especially, you know, I'm in Pat's district, so, which doesn't matter. But so I just hope you kind of think through that and just kind of let me know why, you know, and maybe an apology. Go ahead, say something.
There's no interaction between us and the dais.
She started to talk, so. But yeah, you owe me an apology. I just don't understand why. I didn't deserve that. That was crazy. Spend more time with Heather. She's a sweet, wonderful lady. I always get a good hug from her. Maybe you can learn something from Heather.
Thank you for your public comment. Rio, is that it for public comment up there? So Jessica, we have one person online still, do we?
Yes, we do. For those joining us virtually, if you would like to give public comment, please raise your virtual hand now. I see no hand raised. I'll return it to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, that will conclude our public comment. And now we are on to the consent calendar. All items listed here are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed and the consent calendar will be considered separately. This is an amended consent calendar with 6B1 and 6B2 removed.
Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar with the items 6B1 and 6B2 pulled, which basically means it's 6A1, the minutes.
Second that?
Okay, we have an approval to move the consent calendar by Vice Chair for Tuesday, April 7th, seconded by Commissioner Lovell. This is the amended consent calendar. All those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. Now, Council Bovet, you said you would walk us through these next couple steps, if I recall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to do that, but I also see staff here, and I don't know if any of the staff also wanted to speak. We'll invite them up if they would like. I will just introduce 6B1 and 6B2 by noting that this is driven by a particular code section, specifically section 14.080, subsection 5, and I'm glad staff is moving up here. I will just say, from my experience as a county lawyer for a little bit of time here, this is a very strange code section, and I'll leave it at that, other than note for you that when under this code section, when the planning director refers a matter to the board for review, but also recommends that you affirm the hearing's official, that code section directs that it be placed on your consent calendar for review, which I find very strange because that's not typically how consent calendars work. As we noted at the beginning of the agenda, there was a request from at least one commissioner to pull those two items off, which therefore makes that issue moot. At this point in time, you have your full range of options. I have, for your reference in anticipation of where you may go, crafted two alternate board orders that would schedule each of these matters for a hearing before the board. The CSC matter, which is 6B1 on May 5th, and the Jones-McCann matter, which is 6B2 on May 12th, should the board choose. I kept the header and the order numbers precisely the same, so as they read on your agenda, it still works for purposes of any motion, should you choose to order that a hearing be held. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff. I have stayed away from the substance of both of these matters. I'm just trying to be your procedural person and make sure we get our Ts crossed and Is dotted. And
Chair, I have a procedural question for council. Council, we are quasi-judicial on this matter, is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Farr.
And we'll be receiving testimony from staff and others, or just staff on this?
This is really just procedural for deciding whether or not the board wants to schedule a hearing. So I will advise staff to stay away from the substance of the matters. We're really just talking about the process itself.
Thank you for that clarification.
You bet.
Okay, thank you, council. Ms. Eichner.
Good morning, Chair Senega and Commissioners. My staff experts are up here for any specific questions that you may have, but I don't have anything necessarily to present. We're happy to go with any of the options that you choose.
Excellent. So, to the board then, I guess. Commissioner Farr.
Well, I was that commissioner that recommended to pull this from the consent calendar. A lot of eyebrows were raised. And Ms. Mokraski, I'll look at you when I say this. You can count on one hand during your tenure here that I've pulled things from the consent calendar. In fact, probably on half of one hand. This may even be the first one. And I feel it's that important that we consider these separately from a consent calendar. And I understand the code process that we went through. My question on that for you, Council, at some point would be when was that code written? And how long have we been operating under that code? And how frequently does it actually, I don't need the answer right now because we're limited on time today. But the reason I've pulled these two items, and I have the two orders that council suggested in front of me, is that we do have let's see, what is the term that we use? A pro nova public hearing. Is that the right term?
De novo.
De novo, thank you. My Latin, all right. So, and the reason I did that is because there are matters involved in both of these land use decisions that have received considerable public comment in the past, and it's an opportunity in my observation for the Board of Commissioners to weigh in and apply deference if deference is applicable in this case to the matters that are being considered. I'm not going to go into those matters. That's not for today. We're just talking about the orders, and we're just talking about the process that we're using for the orders. So I'm going to be making two motions, one for each of these two orders, and I'll include the main difference between the orders that were in the original packet and the orders that were printed fresh just this morning. As per somewhat my instructions. And I point out to everybody that this is not adversarial to staff. This is not adversarial to the experts that sit before me, because I defer the land use decisions to you and to other people who have much greater insight, because it is what you do as your vocation. You're great experts on it because that's what you've chosen to do. That's not what I chose to do. However, I do have to weigh in on it from time to time and use process as much as I can. So again, this is not adversarial by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, quite the opposite. As we move through these proceedings, county staff is essential for us to make the right decisions, particularly when it comes to far-reaching policy decisions, which could be the case in these two particular orders. I view these two orders that I'm going to be making motions on as more or less what I'd consider a test case for future decisions that may be made by the board. And there's no question in my mind that the orders will be challenged. But this is a part of the test, the challenge that will occur on these orders, and the process that will go through through LUBA or LCDC, whichever the appropriate venue is. And you can help me with that, or you don't need to at this point in time. That being said, I have two orders, Chair, and I'm ready to make the motions whenever you are ready to hear them.
We're ready for your first motion.
The first motion is Order 260402, and I'll just read a couple of elements from it. And Council, these are published online, these orders, at this point in time, so anyone watching can actually read the full order. It's not online yet. But
not online yet. There's a number of orders online, but we didn't know where the board was going, so, but we will post those, assuming these get adopted.
And I'm hoping you say no. Is it necessary that I read these in full?
No, if you want to read it just by title alone, that's...
Then you have just lowered my blood pressure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the order is 26040702. in the matter of electing whether to conduct an on-record hearing to review the hearings official's decision affirming the planning director's denial of 3 legal lot verifications for 3 properties identified with numbers. The main content of this order is that whereas a majority of the board, that majority has not occurred yet, whereas a majority of the board indicated that it desires to conduct a de novo on-the-record hearing in this matter in accordance with LC 140805C on May 12th. Is there anything else you'd like me to read from that order, Council, or is that enough to substantiate what is the principal change or the principal direction of this order?
See, that is the principal content. The rest is details and directing staff to issue notice, directing the procedures that will be used, which is all laid out in LC 14.0805C.
Thank you. And I'm going to take the opportunity before I actually make the motion for passage to once again say to staff that your expertise is essential in us making the right decisions. And the recommendations that you make to us, we take I personally, I can speak for everybody, I believe on this, that we take them very, very seriously. Because you are our experts. You are the ones who provide the main input for the policy decisions that we make. And please understand that. And for how many years have I been listening to you? For 14 years now, Lindsay, I've been listening to you give me directions, and I really appreciate that. Look forward to 14 more. So my motion then is I move passage of order 26040702.
If I could just have, I just noticed I have a typo. This is my error from moving too fast. This particular one would schedule the hearing for May 5th. You'll see that in number 2 of the operative part of the board, and my typo occurs on page 1 at the bottom where I say May 12th, and that's because I copied language from the next one you're going to read.
So the de novo hearing in this order would be May 5th.
May 5th.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made to approve order number 26040702 to have a de novo hearing on May 5th. Mine says May 5th. Did you mean May 12th?
Yours says May 5th in the operative part, but if you look in the whereas clauses on page 1, I have May 12th as a typo.
My recital was from the whereas clause.
Yeah, copy. That makes sense. Okay. Motion was been made by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Lovell. Discussion. Okay, I'll just say quickly that we've asked to see some more of these cases, and so here we go. Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Trieger and Vice Chair Buck, nay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move along to the second motion then, which will be on 03 with a similar recitation regarding the pro novo on May 5th. And that is in the matter of electing whether to conduct an on-the-record hearing to review the hearing official's denial of a non-farm dwelling proposal to the exclusive farm use, E30, assessors map and numbers. Before I make the motion, I'll say this. I'll say that once again, this is not, at this point in time, disregarding the recommendation to accept the hearings official's decision. This is simply a process where the public is more involved and where the board has an opportunity to review its far-reaching, what will be a far-reaching policy. I am disappointed. Well, I'm not going to even finish that sentence. So my motion is order number 26040703.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Farr to approve order number 26040703 as stated, seconded by Commissioner Farr.
Lovell.
Commissioner Lovell, thank you. Discussion of the motion. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Trieger and Vice Chair Buck in nay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Excuse me, point of order, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Could I have the floor for a moment? I know it's a bit out of order, but I would like to respond to public comment. We used to have county commissioner remonstrance at the top of the meeting so that people that make comment can hear if we have something to say. And I wonder if you might indulge me in making a statement in response to a particular commenter this morning.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate that. Mr. Garcia, and forgive me in advance if I cannot contain my emotions. I have held in for 30 years the fact that you sexually harassed me when I worked for your company. People in this organization have heard me talk about cleaning office buildings at night, waiting tables, working in a number of different low-wage jobs when my family was young and we struggled. And you were one of those employers. You were one of those employers, sir. And I have never stated publicly that particular fact that I experienced. And when you came up to me, presuming it was okay to hug me, and I stood back and said, "You do not have permission to touch me," and that offended you, that is what happened out in the lobby. It was not as dramatic as you portrayed at the podium. There were several people who saw our interactions, sir. You can leave because you can't stand to hear this, that's fine, but other people deserve to hear. Other people deserve to hear, sir, if you're going to come and put on the record comments about an interaction we had that were factually untrue in a lobby full of people who saw it, that's not going to stand. For men to come before this body and speak to the two women here as if they have a right to expect women to smile and demur and allow them to touch them or hug them or approach them in whatever way the man chooses, and that he is embarrassed if we don't let him, is a problem. The fact that Commissioner Buck and I are only the 6th and 7th woman, respectively, to ever have served on this body in a county established in 1851 tells you something about what this community is prepared to see as leadership and respect as leadership. I would never have made a statement like this and called someone out by name, but I cannot let Mr. Garcia's comments stand without a response. It was undignified for him to do so, and I hold my dignity and integrity unapologetically when I sit at this dais. We hear all kinds of things, every single one of us, from people who come to that podium. I am not responding today for myself personally. I am responding today for every woman in this organization and in this community who has had to put up with the kind of behavior that I have had to put up with, not only 30 years ago as a low-wage employee, but as an elected official who dared, as an elected official woman, to reject the presumption that I should be hugged by a man when I didn't want to be. For him to come and give public comment that that is a problem, and I could not let that stand without comment. I have so much more to say, but I will leave it there. I am grateful to you, Chair, for allowing me this opportunity to speak, and I am sorry, Commissioner Buck, that he dragged you into that and tried to pit us against one another as if you are the good woman for being nice and smiling, and I am the evil woman for not allowing him to touch me when I did not want to be touched. That cannot stand. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boukreisky, County Administration, 7A, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will invite Sheena and team, come on up here. I think we have, Jessica, you're going to get a presentation up, so just give us a moment, Chair, to bring our presenters.
It's in the
here.
record. It's on tape.
We have Shana Higashi, our program analyst, special program analyst in our equity program, and Darcy Standifer, who is a member from District 1 of our Equity Program Advisory Board. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Aloha, my name is Shana Higashi. I use she, her pronouns. I am a specialized program analyst with the Equity Program. I'm also the staff liaison for the Equity Program Advisory Board, or we'll use the shortened version of EPAB since it's a mouthful. Today I'm joined with our co-chair, Darcy, and she's our co-chair for our EPAB, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself to you all too.
Hello, my name is Darcy Standifer. My pronouns are she, her. I am from District 1, and I am the co-chair for the EPAB.
So today we'll be reporting some updates and recommendations related to a board assignment. And this was developed really in partnership with our EPAB. During this presentation, we'll walk you through the importance of civic engagement and civic participation. We'll share some challenges that we've identified in making it a truly diverse and inclusive, and present some solutions that we've been piloting with the EPAB. Lastly, we'll share some recommendations that our equity program and the EPAB have developed for the board's consideration. So what do we mean when we talk about civic participation? At its core, it really means that civic participation upholds this fundamental democratic principle that all people have the right and the ability to participate in governance. We think about this through two lenses, the individuals and institutions. So at this individual level, when people feel equipped and informed and feel like they can actually make a difference, and beyond that, valuing each individual, and this means promoting a quality of life where our community members can see themselves reflected in these spaces where decisions are made. And then at the institution level, it's really our responsibility as a local government entity to make it possible for everyone to civically engage in this space. Also, to help them feel like they belong. And so this means empowering diverse voices, ensuring transparency, and ensuring that the community understands how they influence decisions, and critically removing any systemic barriers that have made it harder for some to participate in these spaces. By doing that, we ultimately build trust and open the door for communities and organizations to meaningfully engage with us as an institution. These two levels are deeply interconnected. They don't operate independently. And so the institutions, they set the conditions, and when individuals show up, that's when the conditions are right, when they can meaningfully participate. Okay, so how do we really build a more diverse pipeline? We look at it through these three phases: recruitment, assignment, and retention. And through our work session that we had, you have probably heard these three phases before too. So research points to three interconnected challenges in recruitment, assignment, and retention. And so we included solutions for each of these. So starting with recruitment, the challenge has been difficulty tracking applicants and managing outreach in a consistent way. The solution we've developed is an updated online application that can be paired with a digital database that has the ability to track these applications over time. This gives us a much clearer picture of who's applying and where gaps exist in folks that are participating and being serving in our boards and our commissions. Moving on to assignment, historically, the way that members are selected for advisory boards are inconsistent. And this often it varies because of different things, such as varying requirements. It sometimes allows individuals to appoint rather than using a shared process. There's state and federal guidelines that are included. And so our solution is a model of collective assignment. And that's really just selecting people based on the group's needs and priorities. This often leads to a more intentional, equitable representation that's based on gaps within the group's membership. And then moving on to retention. This is often the hardest piece. The challenge is that limited public understanding on how the county operates, combined with participation barriers, often means that people don't remain or continue to serve in spaces like this. That also means that less people may apply or engagement can decrease through this. So the solution that we are addressing is just removing those barriers through 4 strategies. So we talk about building relational connections, skill building and knowledge development, and then improving accessibility to increase participation so that we ensure that our members have an authentic voice. This means that their input actually influences outcomes. These 3 areas, it came through research and work with a couple of consultants, with our intern that also was here today, that presented and interned with us earlier, and interviews connected with some of our Equity Program Advisory Board members. And they've been really foundational in how we've structured our work and collaboration with the EPAB. So looking at recruitment, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. But you folks probably already know about this because, again, we did a work session on it in the past. And this is related to our updated application. And so this kind of gives an overview of our updated Lane County Committee and Advisory Board application. We're very excited, and I'll share a little bit later that we're getting very close to completing the rollout for this. But it does several things. It increases accessibility. It helps us streamline processes. And when these things are used together, it really leads to that improved public engagement and participation. And I mentioned that in the future, there's an option where we could possibly use the data collected, optional data collected, to create a dashboard that can have future transparency for our public. I think I can pull it up. So really quick, I'll just scroll for the public to kind of see. This is the updated application we're working on, and we're getting ready to roll out in the near future. So it is an online application. And you can see that it now lists all of our available advisory boards and committees all in one space instead of people having to apply individually. So I already spoke a little bit to the accessibility about it being web-based. Currently, we have a PDF fillable application. It's also one form rather than people needing to submit separate ones. And then it really invites the sharing of demographic information and accessibility needs in this space. And then it's much more inclusive of people sharing other items like their gender, name preference, housing status, primary language preferences, and accessibility needs that we need to be aware of. So for next steps, we recently completed 3 staff liaison training sessions in our county admin staff. And this covered topics related to this application rollout. We wanted to ensure that staff were aware of, they've been a big collaborator in this process, but making sure that they saw kind of what the application looks like, being able to talk through. We also went over some tips and suggestions for running advisory boards, and then we gave a brief overview of some public meeting law information for them to be aware of and training that needs to be done. So ultimately, this application, the implementation is estimated soon. We're hoping in spring of this year. And so following these 3 trainings, just ensuring that we work out all of the kinks and that it works properly with notifying people when applications are received, it'll be rolled out shortly. So we're getting very close to that. Moving on to retention. So looking at this slide, retention's a really important part of this work. And so when we combine connection, and that's being really relational with people, this intentional relational bonds between members. We also include skill building and knowledge building, which increases the confidence of the members to participate, and then also pair that with accessibility, various accessibility considerations. This thoughtfully really removes practical barriers to showing up in these spaces. Through this, it helps, again, move towards that improved public engagement that we're hoping for. And it's really important to note that all 3 of these are important and necessary to help with retention efforts. And it's not just one that we can kind of pull out. We're ultimately working towards this authentic voice and influence, where really each member feels that their participation is worth their time and investment. Not, I think like DJ had said, not that we're getting something out of them being here and serving often in volunteer capacities, but that they're also being able to see themselves and then feel more confident to move and serve in other civic spaces. So now I'm going to turn it over to Darcy. She's going to share a little bit about our Equity Program Advisory Board.
Okay, so I just want to take a moment to ground all of this, what the EPAB actually is and what it does. The purpose is to advise the county administrator in the equity program on 2 things. Number 1 is the implementation of equity strategic plan and the accountability measures that accompanies it. These are not passive roles. The EPAB is partner in shaping how this county moves forward towards equity. The EPAB also serves as a bridge between the community and the Lane County. Members bring issues and concerns from their networks. They take information back from Lane County into their communities. And then over time, we develop a relationship, a 2-way exchange that we can build trust. This bridging role is something that we don't take for granted. It requires a real relationship and requires that members feel that their participation matters.
So now I'll be talking about some strategies we piloted with the EPAB. And they're not just an advisory body. They've also, like I've been mentioning, they've been our testing ground for some of these strategies that we're hoping to bring countywide and try out. So the first part on authentic voice. Again, just having the ability to influence our county systems, such as bringing back recommendations like today, and then influencing one another through that connection and relationship that they're building with each other. I've seen people run into each other in other community spaces, and that relationship, them connecting, because that's another familiar face that they served in these spaces together with. Also on building mutually beneficial relationships. This, again, goes back to what can we help our members gain as they're spending time with us. So it's that skill building, helping them learn new skills through these processes, whether that's leadership items, technical assistance, and that's just as support, staff being more supportive and providing that help. And then them being able to model that with each other as they serve as leaders in our advisory board, and then they're able to build that confidence to serve in others outside. And then lastly, these barriers to civic participation. So we invested in onboarding, and this is something that I do with all of our new members. We do a 30-minute onboarding, and I explain a little overview of the county. I talk about what the EPAB does. We talk a little bit about our strategic plan, and then we go over just bias awareness and a little bit about public meetings law, and then I provide them the information with the training from OGEC that they need to do as well. Additionally, we've built in community meals with each other and building that relationship prior to meetings that allows them to bridge these diverse cultures and backgrounds. And then we have been using a $500 accessibility fund that members can apply on an as-needed basis to help provide for childcare or caregiver costs during our meetings. Transportation, we encourage folks to attend in person, and some folks travel from the coast and far areas that takes time and gas. And so that is something that has been helpful, and that probably has been the most used along with childcare cost. And we have never depleted that $500. It's really just been used on an as-need basis for our meetings. And so really these are just small ways that really can help make participation more accessible. Okay, I'm handing it back to Darcy to talk about their data collection.
So I just want to briefly share the data collection assignment with EPAB completed at the end of the year in connection with goal number 5 of the Equity Strategic Plan, which is to foster inclusive, equitable framework for the community engagement and civic participation. To do that well, we need to hear directly from the community. The EPAB helped design and carry out the data collection effort, which itself is an example of how us using the data collection skills and have an authentic voice and connect with the community networks. The data collection was centered around 2 key questions. First one was open-ended. What makes you feel like you belong and want to get involved in your community? We wanted to understand belonging. We wanted this in people's own words. The second question asked respondents to select all that would apply. How would you prefer to provide input, give feedback, and participate in an open dialogue and decision-making with Lane County? This one was about meeting people where they are, understanding that not everybody wants to engage in the same way, and that if we're only offering one mode of participation, then we're excluding other people by design. These responses were very informative.
So through that data collection, there was a lot of brainstorming that happened, and so these are some of the recommendations that have come from it. Please note that what I'll be sharing from the EPAB, it's just 2 of several recommendations that they have that they outlined from this data collection assignment, and the full list of recommendations is included in their 2025 annual report. So for the first one, the recommendation is to commit to creating inclusive public meetings by designing spaces to be more accessible for all using universal design principles. So we're asking, why might this matter? Well, ultimately, accessibility and universal design ensures that physical and digital spaces can be used by everyone without barriers and without requiring individuals to request special accommodations after the fact. When accessibility is built in from the start, it benefits everyone. So the EPAB identified, and I'm not going to go through all of these bullet points, but it is broken down by mandated actions and then some non-mandated actions that can be thought of for additional consideration in the future. The mandated actions, they're required by federal and state law, such as Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA compliance, website content accessibility guidelines, WCAG standards, and then limited English proficiency, the LEP provisions. And then at a starting point, what we recommend is that the county begins with a countywide assessment of buildings and meeting spaces to see where there are gaps regarding accessibility and ADA Title II regulations. So just at a baseline, just seeing where we're at with things and then being able to assess from there and build out how we can have more universal design principles built into any upgrades and future building spaces that we make. For recommendation 2, it's to strengthen community partnerships through collaboration and invest resources into local organizations to ensure essential community services are sustainable across our county. This recommendation really recognizes that inclusion can't live only inside government. It has to extend into the places where our people and community members are, and where they already gather and the people that they already trust. So the EPAB identified a bunch of ideas, and we've divided them both into lower implementation actions. They can be seen as quick wins that build trust with community. And then there's these higher implementation actions that go a little deeper. They have long-term impacts, but it may take more time and planning and consideration on what that whole process may look like. But it's really neat to kind of see their ideas and how they were able to fall into these different buckets. The main line through this, and this is something that we gathered through that second question that they asked in their data collection, and it's really just trust. Trust is really, really important. And so that's why we wanted to bring up ways that we can build trust with community. Okay, now moving forward, this was our collaborative recommendation, both with our equity program and the EPAB. And it ties in together both with the data they connected, the things they've been piloting, and the work that we've been doing together. So beyond those two EPAB recommendations, our equity program and the EPAB would like to recommend that the board explores establishing a task force or some kind of group that's composed both of staff and community members. And really, what this task force or group would do is to, it would be probably time limited is what we're thinking, but to be charged with making policy recommendations that could be piloted countywide across our different advisory boards and committees. If this group is established, we further recommend that this participation in piloting is mandatory in our different advisory boards and committees to see how it's working across all of the different ones. We did it in the EPAB, and it's been found to be very successful, and we would like to see how it works in these different spaces. And then at the end of the pilot period, whatever that's designated as, have that group come back and report to the board so that the board can review those findings and determine next steps on what that can look like. Again, this broader principle is by identifying strategies, we foster more of this equitable engagement that we're hoping to have here. And if that's found to be true through piloting initiatives, that we should adopt it countywide to truly foster that as a whole across all of our advisory boards and committees so that there is more community representation in these spaces. Before we close, I wanted to share a couple of stories and quotes. You probably heard a couple from public comment, but one of our EPAB members said, "I found the strength to be authentic. So let me put it like that. I did not have the strength before. I can authentically say that without any doubt, I feel empowered, engaged, and validated in several ways." And then Darcy, and I'm gonna let her speak more to this as well, but through one of her interviews, she talked about our Travel Accessibility Fund on how that's very beneficial. Other than that, just the patience to walk you through the process is very helpful. It has been very transferable because I've signed up and I serve on several other different boards as well. So I'm going to give Darcy just a few minutes to kind of share about her experience with the EPAB.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I do want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you first for all the effort that you have put into the EPAB. Getting Jose Menendez, was it? To help us in the first year was so very helpful, and having Lee, the intern. I do appreciate having that mileage reimbursement. I come from Florence, so that's very helpful. Just as far as my story is, I wanted to be involved into the community somehow. I wanted to be involved in government. I was thumbing through Facebook, doom scrolling, and I saw an advertise for the equity program. I had no idea what it was, and I thought, okay, why not? I'll do it. And I did jump in, and I had no idea what I was doing. And Jose Menendez and Lee and everybody else pretty much held our hands through this whole process, gave us our training wheels. After that, this year, I have taken those training wheels off. I have signed up for the CAC. I am on all the other subcommittees, the RAC, the HEC, and the MEC. When I joined the CAC, we jumped right into a data party with the Sheik. And then I joined the Sheik, and there I was giving the county their 3 priorities. And you guys got that presentation, 30 minutes of data-packed information. I was a part of that as well. I also joined the LCTEA committee, which we are now going around doing roadshows, which is, I hear we have grant money and we're trying to get public opinion on that grant money. I'm also on the stabilization committee, where we are impacting the design and the arts that are going to go into that stabilization committee. I got all of this, I guess, courage from the EPAB and all the accessibility, getting the mileage helped me bring me here. And it also helped me bring stuff to Florence as well. Florence I got the feeling that Florence was kind of like an ugly stepchild of the county. Everybody would say something, oh, it all happens in Eugene and Springfield. It has nothing to do with us. One of my goals was to bring it to Florence and make them involved. And so the EPAB helped me do that. And again, thank you so much for your time and effort.
And with that, we'll kind of close with just questions or comments on these recommendations.
Chair, is it okay if I just make a quick comment before we turn it over?
Yeah, of course.
Well, first, I want to say that I think we need to create a volunteer recognition program, and Darcy should be at the top of the list for the amount of work that you're doing volunteering on different groups. It's really incredible. I wasn't aware of all of that. I want to just briefly, Chair and Commissioners, say that I don't want to miss this opportunity because there's been so much work. There's been a lot of discussion nationally about equity and equity programs, and so many organizations, public and private, have walked away from their commitment to equity. And what we've said very intentionally in Lane County is our view of equity work is not that it is not a political ideology. It is about people. It is about making sure that we're supporting and getting the best out of the people that work for our organization and the people that we serve in our community. And Shayna and Darcy did an incredible job, I believe, in articulating, particularly around these issues of access, that when we have a county that's the geographic size of the state of Connecticut, and you have residents in Florence and Oak Ridge and Mackenzie Bridge and Junction City and Cottage Grove, and the list goes on and on. Well, we're asking people to participate and volunteer in different advisory board meetings. We're trying to serve residents in those communities. It's why we've opened a health clinic in Cottage Grove. It's why we're working on opening a medication-assisted treatment in Florence, because we recognize we can't do everything out of the metro area. We need to make sure that we're providing services and supports. And when we engage residents to volunteer and participate and hear the voice of our community, we need to make sure that it's accessible. And so these were all things that were piloted by our equity program that were led here by Shayna and Latife and the EPAB group. And so I just want to hit that point home that given all this kind of ideological sideshow, I will say, about these attacks on, or the use of equity for, as sort of a wedge issue, that is, we don't view it as a at all. It is about people. And the extent to which we employ and we serve people in Lane County, which is something we will always do, then we should be doing equity work, because it's about making sure that we're serving everyone and we're a place that is an employer for and supporting and getting the best out of all of our people. So the shift has really been about making sure that we are inclusive, and you heard this repeatedly from this work, that it is about inclusion. It's not, we are not for exclusion, we are for inclusion, and also recognizing that different people face different barriers, right? Depending on where you live geographically, depending on your socioeconomic status, depending on various factors. We need to understand those different factors, not treat everybody, understand those different factors and make sure that we're able to create access and opportunity for everyone. So I just wanted to say that on the broader picture, I want to thank Shana in particular for incredible work. She has so much behind the scenes that folks don't see. So I'm really glad that commissioners and the public got to see that work. And again, thank Darcy, who I will say it has to be the volunteer of the year.
Okay, to the board, I will say I didn't want to stop any of that great work that was happening, but we have about 10 minutes because we have an hour and a half's worth of work and we need 10 minutes to recess and fire things up. So, Commissioner Farr.
I'll try to hold this to 8.5 minutes.
I knew it. Should have grabbed you last.
No, actually, this will be very fast because a few words can really highlight the work that's been doing. I'm going to look first at Greg Rickoff in the back of the room. Remember the very early days when we'd sit in the room upstairs and people were wondering, why are we here? Well, it became defined very, very quickly. And Darcy, you have elaborated very clearly why it is clear. Mr. Taqwa, Lee Taqwa, I've read some of your actual words from the documents in front of us right now, and I think that Lee is an example of why this is important. Some of the things that Lee said at the podium, some of the work that I'm looking at that Lee provided in the report, Darcy, that you're reporting on, that you're presenting to us today, and it really is significant that someone, and pardon me, Lee, I'm going to pick on you just a little bit here, that you're able to get up to the mic, which is not easy. In this environment, which is not easy, with these faces staring at you, which I know is not easy, to articulate as clearly and effectively as you just did, that is huge. And if that was the only single success that the EPAB has had, then we've won. But that's not the only single success that we've had. And I'm not going to talk any more about that other than to say that yesterday, I went on a tour of Everyone Village with students from Kalapuya High School, the construction students from Kalapuya High School who are building some of the houses that are going into Everyone Village. And as I looked around that group of 17 young individuals, broad range group of individuals who otherwise would not be going to high school if not for Kalapuya High School. These are many of the voices that we are talking about exactly right here today, lending people the ability to use their voice in ways that people will hear their voice. And the group that were there not only are learning construction, but they're learning but instead of dropping out of high school, they're actually deciding which college they're going to go to. And it's because their voices are being heard in ways that you are talking about. Mr. Mokorohaski, here at Lane County, we have to be a leader. We have got to be a leader in this and set an example, not just in the county, but that can be resonant throughout the entire nation, how we can treat people in our organization, and not just in our organization, and not just inside of our county, but with some of the things that are brought forward in these reports. You're asking us to accept the recommendations for establishing a task force. Yes, I'm on that. And then if the task force is established, you have further recommendations. Yes, I'm on that for the record. So whatever steps need to be taken today, Mr. Mokorohaski, I'll be a part of that. I took 3 minutes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Trigger.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and particularly for the work. Right up top, I'm supportive of the recommendations. I'm not wedded to it being a task force. That's a very particular and formal mechanism. I leave it to the committee and the equity program folks and the administrator to figure out what the best mechanism is, but I fully support the recommendations and the scope and what we hope to accomplish through that, and wonder what the EPAB's role would be as different from a task force. So leave that operational piece to all of you, but know that I support it fully. It's a great example too from, well, also I want to be invited to a data party. That sounds really fun. You know, this is a great example, and Darcy, you're sort of the classic case study for it that I like to talk about, particularly on our budget committee, because we face such complex budget challenges that the community doesn't understand, is that our committee volunteers are really like ambassadors out to the community. They're the sort of two-way swinging door between the county organization and the community, because they're bringing in community perspective, but also taking back out to community real information about county operations and what we do. And so I'm really supportive of anything we can do to get a broader range of experiences on each committee, but also across committees across the county, because you can only have but so much different kinds of representation on a committee that's 7 people or what have you. And I really like the items around re-examining how not only that we recruit, but then we seat and appoint, because many, as you mentioned, many of our commissioners just say they go out and find a person that they would like to see sort of represent. And that's not necessarily equitable. When we have, for instance, with our task force that we just stood up for land banking program, I only got to see the applicants from my district. And so I didn't know what kinds of representation was being considered, both in content expertise or any number of things that the other commissioners had in front of them. So that was another example of how we've set up a system where the commissioners themselves have created sort of a barrier to us participating in fostering more equitable representation across committees, because we don't see all of the applicants. And some of them, we don't even get applications at all. We just make direct appointments. So lots of room for improvement. And I love what you've done there to get us started on that route. And in closing, I'll just say 2 things. As a former member of the earlier iteration of the Equity and Access Advisory Board, I served on that board after a term on our budget committee. And so it wasn't my first touch point serving on an advisory, but it's so gratifying to me to see the evolution of the committee and this sort of new iteration of it. It shows me that the county is not only doing the right thing with having a committee, but that we know how to be responsive and reimagine how we do things based on context changing, which it very much has since 2017, 18, and 19 when I was on the committee with DJ Kelly Kotroki, who spoke to us this morning. And I think it really speaks to Lee's comments and Darcy, your experience, how being on these committees can really be a sort of springboard for folks to connect even more deeply and in other ways. I think back to who was on that committee when I served on it and how many folks are now in elected office, working for local governments, managing programs, or in leadership positions, or doing other work in the community informed by the experience on that committee and grounded in the understanding of public bodies as a partner in advocacy work instead of an adversary or a barrier. Really different ways of operating when you're in the public sector than when you're in the private nonprofit or activist spaces, but we have to all work together. So I really appreciate how this committee in particular and the recommendations you have can help Lane County be part of helping foster a more sort of integrated ecosystem to move change across both public and private. So thank you for the work. Thank you for serving on the committee. Thank you, Lee, for committing your internship hours to this really great work, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm absolutely supportive of the recommendations. When I've been out in the community talking with folks about how we can become more inclusive in our committees or how we can get more participation from differing populations, what you presented is exactly what I've been hearing. There are barriers for them to figure out like how they fit in with the county. You know, I love that, Darcy, you were just on the internet trying to figure out how can I plug in. And some people aren't quite even to that point yet. They're at the point where they're, just living their daily lives. And sometimes it takes us reaching out to them and saying, you have skills that could really benefit the community. How how can we invite you into our space in a way in which they feel like they're really being heard? And sometimes there's cultural differences that we're just need to be sensitive to. We need to build those relationships with those community-based organizations so that they know that there's a two-way street, right? And that they can then disseminate that information to the people in which they serve and say, you have skills that we would love to be able to utilize here at the county level, and then serve the people that are important to them as well. So appreciate all the work. I know this has taken some time to get through. Part of what I did here specifically was our application, and how we process those applications was in many ways a barrier for people. They often think, well, if it's a finance committee, let's just say, well, I'm not a CPA, or I'm not a bookkeeper. I don't know that I have anything to contribute to that particular committee. And this can be said for whatever type of committee it is. They just may not have the expertise in that area. And it's our job to say, you don't have to be an expert. That's not what we need from you. We need somebody who has critical thinking skills, somebody who's interested in the subject perhaps, or wants to find a way in which they can give back and serve. And that can be from a diverse background that has nothing to do with that particular, specific committee itself, but they have other life skills that are directly attributable to what we need. And what really does truly give back to the community. So thank you for all this work. I know there's lots more to do in operationalizing all of this, but you have my support.
Okay.
I just forgot to mention, sorry, I wanted to say, since this was in response ultimately to an assignment that I made back in May of 2021, which I was commenting to Shayna when we were checking in recently, that it's a great example of that was something, an assignment I made early on as a commissioner, right? In my first term, where we don't always understand what it actually takes. What is the lift we're asking of staff when we make these assignments? And so I am so pleased to see, I'm so glad that we took the time we did, even though it sometimes felt like, why is this taking so long? It was worth the wait, and thank you. And for Jessica and for the record, I am satisfied with the assignment being considered closed with the presentation of this report, and look forward to hearing back progress on the recommendations should we all agree to move forward with them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you've got head nods. Continue on. Appreciate it, Darcy. Thanks for all the work. I hear that a lot from my Florence constituents, and I do everything I can to resolve that, and you being involved at the depth you are really does help, and it gives us some good representation. So thank you. Appreciate the presentation, and we are going to call that. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes for an election update.
Actually, Chair, if it's all right, I have Director Gray here who is going to provide an update. If we could do that one, and then if you want to break, I can do the elections update and the other items later. She has an 11 o'clock. Oh, is that okay?
Yep,
so,
that works great.
Director Gray is here to talk about Youth Mobile Crisis Services and the Riverview Center for Growth. This was brought up last week. We had some public comment that the board heard, and want to invite our Director of Health and Human Services to share an update with you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. So I think where we are at in Youth Mobile Crisis Services is making sure that our statutorily and by contract mandated services continue to be provided. And we have for many years now funded a very robust program at Riverview, and we have funded that program because it's needed in our community, because it's the right thing to do, because it's good to serve families. And we funded it with our county financial assistance agreement and a pot of money that was generic for stabilization services. And at the time that we made the decision to invest in this program, those funds were fairly flexible for the community mental health program to look at what are the needs in our community and how do we assign crisis dollars to those needs. And over time, there are some wonderful things that happen when we have successful programs, like they get funded by Medicaid, and we mandate them statewide, right? Those are wonderful things because we take what are often pilot programs in communities that are very innovative, and we try to spread those. What happens in that process is also that things get defined. Statutes get written, rules get defined, and strings get attached to dollars in ways that maybe weren't in the past, or further definition of the utilization of those dollars. And so where we are today is a recognition that the dollars that are intended for mobile crisis are more restrictive in their use than the traditional program that we have funded through Riverview. And as you all know, there were some changes to the County Financial Assistance Agreement this year that reduced our ability to kind of take other funds and say, but this work is still really important. This other work is still really important. We want to continue to fund it. Instead, we really are required to focus those dollars on our forensic population, so the individuals who are involved in the criminal justice system or the civil commitment system, and we don't have dollars left over. So we are meeting with Riverview tomorrow to really drill down and understand what are the different types of calls that they're going on, ensure that anything that is covered under the statute and the rules for mobile crisis and for youth, there's a stabilization component for a certain number of days after the mobile crisis encounter, that all of that will continue to be wrapped up, patients will continue to be served. The longer-term services that are being provided by Riverview to their clients in particular, which go beyond the typical stabilization period and are part of that client being enrolled in their services, we are going to do our best to work with them to identify ways that they can continue to bill for those services under different types of codes and receive reimbursement. But those aren't things that we can continue to fund under the mobile crisis dollars as they're defined. So there's really a process right now of us kind of splitting things out, identifying how can we do our very best to make sure that the services are continuing to be offered because they are essential, while knowing that our funding sources have changed, and that has changed how we are able to fund these types of services. So happy to answer any questions about that, but just wanted to provide a little bit of context about what's going on and what our follow-up is.
Okay, thank you. This is something I'm sure we could ask questions one-on-one if we have them later at a different time as well. Commissioner Fly.
Just a note, and Director Gray, thank you for the clarification regarding how funds become more restrictive as programs expand statewide. This is not the first time that's happened. It happens on a fairly regular basis, and it's easy to understand, sort of, for me, when it happens. Very difficult to understand when you're the recipient of the funds. And I really appreciate the way that you are working with Riverview to help everyone in the system understand why things have to happen a certain way because of the way it's statutorily mandated to us. That's all on this at this point in time. But Eve, it's not easy work that you're doing. And I do not envy the discussions with Riverview because they're providing an invaluable, indispensable service. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my hope, too, that in the conversations with Riverview, we can get to a place where we're all expressing our shared frustration and the limitations that we're all experiencing. This is not the only area that we're going to be having these kinds of conversations and faced with these kinds of decisions programmatically, or I should say you all aren't, the staff isn't, we're not making program decisions. But as we head into budget and in the wake of a couple of legislative sessions where some financing and revenue things did not go the way we would have liked, I think this is just another example of, rather than everybody pointing fingers at each other, we understand we have a shared problem, the providers that we contract with and us as Lane County, and that is that because of regulatory barriers and/or funding formula miscalculations that aren't relevant to the facts on the ground here in Lane County, the sort of one-size-fits-all approach, and just contraction of resource, these are the kinds of changes that get made. And so hopefully those conversations can help Riverview not just understand our position, but we understand theirs, so we can all have one voice about up in Salem and to the federal government about the impacts on the ground of these kinds of decisions that get made. Thank you.
Okay, so if that's it, we are going to recess until 10:45. We have 7 minutes, and we'll re-adjourn in the BCC conference room. Thank you. Welcome back to Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting for April 7th, 2026. We have another county administration item here, 8A. And off to you, Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. Morning, Commissioners, County Administrator. Today, Emily Verio, Assistant County Counsel, and myself, Sean Hubble, Procurement Manager, are reporting back on a board assignment dated July 22nd, 2025. And that was the possibility of creating a local preference policy as it relates to procurement. I've got a short presentation I'll go through. It's really just meant to kind of guide the discussion. So if you have any questions or any items you'd like to bring up during, as I go through the slides, please feel free to. Okay, so first I'll go through the preferences that Oregon currently allows. The Public Contracting Code does give preference to Oregon offers in these following situations. And the first three are required by the county. And that is, the first one is when offers are identical in price, fitness, availability, or quality, then we would use, if one of the offers is from the state of Oregon, that would be the deciding factor to break the tie. The other one is there's a reciprocal preference, and that's when a lowest non-resident offer is from a state that has a preference in their home state. So for instance, New Mexico has an 8% in-state preference. Therefore, if the state of Oregon contractor were to bid in New Mexico, they would give preference to a New Mexico bidder that was within 8% of the bid if the Oregon state bidder was the lowest. In Oregon, what we do is we do a reciprocal preference, and so we would add 8% to a bidder from New Mexico if they were to bid on a project in Oregon. That's called reciprocal preference. And then the third required preference the state of Oregon has in statute is goods that are made from recycled materials. If an offer is within 5% of the either bid or proposal score, the award would go to the offer that included recycled materials. Then there's two optional preferences. One is that the offer is from a benefit company and is within 5% of the lowest offer. And the second one is for goods and services that are from Oregon and are within the state of Oregon and are within 10% of the lowest offer. These are optional preferences. And also along with that, those bottom two, the county can decide on a higher percentage or lower percentage if the board were to decide. So that's what the state of Oregon has for preferences currently. This is what Lane County currently does or could do. We just recently, well, in the last year, implemented an Amazon Business Prime account for countywide. And when we set that up, we configured it to sort based on Lane County sellers are listed first in the search results. Second, Oregon vendors, and this differs from the presentation I gave you. This was a last minute change. Second is Oregon vendors are considered. So first, Lane County vendors, second, Oregon vendors. The slides I gave you mentioned that there's a minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, emerging small businesses vendors. They are actually listed third. And then all other offers, obviously. What else can Lane County do? And this is relatively new. We just added it to our administrative procedure manual. We've given direction to staff to seek local vendors when direct awarding. The county can direct award purchases that are under $25,000, and now we're directing staff to seek local vendors if they're going to make a direct award. And then also in the intermediate threshold level there, which is up to $250,000, to seek local and minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, or emerging small business vendors when they're requesting quotes. So seek at least one quote from either a local or a minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, or emerging small business. We're sending out, we're requesting 3 quotes. The guidance we give everyone in training is if you're seeking 3 quotes, go ahead and seek 4. And then formal purchases, well, bids are awarded to the lowest offer, right? That's in statute. ITB bids are awarded to lowest offer. Proposals can, however, include criteria such as local familiarity, response time, etc., if there's a business case to be made for that. So as an example, here's an example criteria for a request for proposal. So the county could score something along the lines of local familiarity, right? And this was in regards to, let's say we're hiring a treatment provider. We're contracting for a treatment provider. So local familiarity, describe your knowledge and expertise in providing treatment services within Lane County or a similar locale. And then we would award points based on their response to that. Again, that is a case-by-case basis. If local familiarity or a response time or something along those lines would benefit the project and would make sense. So what's that resulted in? So again, we do preach in our trainings. We do tell everyone, you know, it's very important to support the local economy, and we talk about some of the benefits of that, such as number 1, the financial impact. Number 2, local workforce development, and then 3, local pride. Right? There's a lot to be said for having local Lane County businesses helping the county succeed here at Lane County. So local county businesses bringing their skills to improve Lane County. Some of the metrics, we actually stopped and did some analysis on this for the 2025 calendar year. 46% of our current vendors are local. It's 2,540 vendors. 55% of our spend is with local vendors in 2025. That equates to $101 million. We did go through and we pulled things out such as reimbursements, refunds. So the $101 million is not a direct correlation to all the money that Lane County spends, obviously. But it is as far as vendors that we're making repeat purchases from, at least more than 2. Yeah, it counts for 55% of our spend. And then of the county's top 20 vendors, 13 are local. And we use BidLocker is our procurement platform where we advertise all of our invitations, bids, requests for proposals, and also requests for quotes. And we have 351 local vendors. And when I say local, there are here in Lane County that are registered at BidLocker. So next I'll talk about what it would take to create a local preference policy. We have a procurement advisory team. It's made up of about 24 subject matter experts across the county that work with procurement. They handle procurements on the county's behalf. That group could come together and draft a policy. A couple things that we would need to decide on is what is local. Right, that's a key question that came up as I was going through looking at this. Are we expecting a vendor to have an office here in Lane County, to be headquartered in Lane County, to employ X number of employees in Lane County? So we would need to figure that out. And then what situations would the policy be applied to? County Council would need to do a little research. The Dormant Commerce Clause.
So I'll take this one. The Dormant Commerce Clause is the inverse of the Commerce Clause, which is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution that dictates that Congress will regulate commerce amongst the states. The inverse of that is the Dormant Commerce Clause that prohibits states from discriminating against other states. So there is a possibility of the argument of a local preference could violate the dormant commerce clause because it would have an impact against another state and would invite litigation. So if we went this route, we would need to do additional research to make sure that the policy would not inadvertently violate the dormant commerce clause.
Thank you. And is the policy defendable?
Correct.
In my research, the local preference policy is rare, is very rare. I could not find any other public agencies here in the Pacific Northwest that offer one, that have a local preference policy in place. I did come across instances where they were discussed at different locales, but I could not find another entity that had one in place here in the Pacific Northwest.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah,
City of Eugene, they have a certain percentage of bids on certain projects are designated for art. Don't they have a local preference on their art? But you don't need to answer that right now, but
No,
it seems that they do.
That's a great question. There is a percent for art program that City of Eugene
Yeah,
has
I
in
thought they had a
place.
local preference.
But to my knowledge, they do not have a local preference policy in place, to my knowledge, at least.
I was only a counselor for 10 years, so.
I can check on that and follow up with you. Would that be acceptable?
No, it's not significant, but I was trying to, it bamboozles me that there isn't such a thing in all of your research, so please continue.
Sure. And then obviously the board would need to approve the policy with a board order. Once the policy were decided on, procurement would then update the lane manual, the administrative procedures manual, and all the templates, and then procurement would build this local preference policy into our staff trainings. So there's a little bit of work to get a policy in place. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the local preference policy. Potential benefits: it benefits the local economy. And I can't say that enough. That is a really big one. As we put this list together, you know, our potential risks, there's kind of a list over there, but I wanted to really hit that home, as I'm sure the commissioners are very well aware of, that it does benefit our local economy. It could expand the local vendor base, reduce carbon emissions, right? Rather than purchasing goods from across the country and having them shipped in, if we could purchase Lane County goods from here in Lane County, reduce carbon emissions, and again, it promotes our communities, right? The civic pride. Potential risks. It is not a common practice in Oregon, to say the least. Very rare. It can conflict with federal regulations, so we'd have to be careful and make sure we're reviewing all of our grant materials. Any type of project is funded with federal or outside of Lane County funds if a local preference is permissible. It has the potential to discourage non-local vendors. Reciprocal preference concerns. Again, I could not find any instances of this already within the state of Oregon. So that is a potential risk that if Lane County were to have a preference for Lane County vendors only, what would other counties do? Could they have a reciprocal preference? It could limit innovation. It would add steps to the procurement process, possible litigation, as council brought up, and then a strain on vendor relationships. So in summary, Oregon law does address certain preferences for in-state vendors. Lane County currently does take steps to communicate opportunities to local and minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, and emerging small business vendors that are registered, that are certified in COVID, the state of Oregon's certification office. Currently, vendors compete for opportunities on a level playing field. Per our analysis, Lane County spends a considerable amount with local vendors. A local preference could bend the playing field in favor of local, meaning Lane County vendors, and away from non-local vendors. And doing so presents potential benefits to our economy, but also presents considerable risks and additional work. So So are there any questions, any?
I'm guessing.
Okay, okay. So to bring it home, so the intent of today's presentation is to provide the board with information to help inform a future decision. I did include in your packets a white paper that was written up by the National Institute of Government Procurement discussing local preferences.
Okay, to the board. Commissioner Trigger.
Sure. Start us off. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for the presentation and doing the work to dig in on this. It seems, a couple of things, if we even go down this path, the definition of local seems really key to me. This idea of whether a company, where they're headquartered, if they're a private entity, where their shareholders are they private equity, all that, that's a biggie. But do we not already do some kind of weighting? How is it different to have weighting when we're scoring competing applications, thinking particularly for services, like in the Human Services Division? It's my understanding we weight applicants like if they've provided services with us before. How is doing weighting different than having a sort of blanket local preference policy? Couldn't that just be one of the weights? And I'm also curious about the limits innovation piece, if you have anything more to say about that.
Sure.
Those are my two questions. Thanks.
So when we issue a request for proposal, it's a very formal process, right? It's prescribed per the state statutes. But we include criteria in our solicitation document, and then our proposers respond to that criteria, and then we score per the scores that were in the solicitation document. So the criteria is up to the issuing department as to what criteria they want to include in there. If local familiarity would benefit a project, they can include that as a criteria. Along those same lines, if a proposer, for example, a proposer in Multnomah County was responding to a request for proposal and they felt that was limiting them, restricting them from being able to propose on a project, they do have the opportunity to submit a solicitation protest. So that's one good thing that I find is a benefit of this, is by including criteria that would support a local entity in a request for proposal, other proposers do have the opportunity to say, wait, I want to discuss this. This seems to restrict competition.
And we did have a case of that not long ago.
Yes, yes. But as far as weighted scores go across the board, we do not have any type of required weighted score for prior experience. Although most likely that is part of the criteria that the department chooses to put in their RFP. It's not a requirement.
I think you have to think about it some more. I think I'm also trying to do that sort of begin with the end in mind. What are we trying to accomplish if it's part of leading towards supporting greater economic activity and development locally and more close, that we might work our way back from that goal a little differently in how we structure a policy like this than, if it's supporting job creation or retention of businesses that are already here is a very specific goal. So, lots to chew on. Thank you.
I'm sorry, there was a second point to your item, and I might have missed that.
Oh, about limiting innovation, if you wanted to say anything more about that.
Yes, thank you. The only time that a local preference, well, it depends on how the board, if the board decides to establish local preferences and how that local preference were to come about. But there's a potential to discourage others from outside the county, right? So perhaps, again, I'll go back to treatment providers. Perhaps there is a contractor in Multnomah County that has a great solution that perhaps would not submit a proposal here in Lane County because we have such a preference for Lane County vendors. That's the thought behind the limiting innovation.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. You know, more than anything, you're given a lot to think about, because at face value, I'd say just buy it locally, whatever you do, which I can do from my home, right? I can use the local market rather than Kroger's. My choice. But a couple of data points that you gave us, 46% of our vendors are local, but we spend 55% of the dollars with those 46% of local vendors, which indicates that some local vendors, particularly on larger products, already have a preference based upon the fact that it's difficult. Outside vendors have difficulty delivering the product. I'll give a prime example, sand and gravel. You got to buy it locally, you know. There's nothing that shipped from overseas. You've got to buy it locally. That accounts for that. But other than that, you know, as we look at the potential negative impacts, that is substantial. And I'm curious about the
Dormant Commerce Clause,
which I have here from Harvard, and Harvard's describing it to me, and that's kind of frightening, really, because it seems that anybody could challenge you with that on a court case in that, and really cause a great deal of issue. So I guess what I need to say is my initial response is let's buy it locally, but then you're given cautions as to why we should take more time to consider this. And I appreciate the depth of the research you've done on this. It really is an indication of the work that you do together. And I really, I don't have a recommendation at this point in time other than give us more information and let's have deeper conversations and move forward before we buy locally. Regarding weighting, I think the weighting that we do, isn't that regarding the MSVW?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
MWVESB, minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, emerging small businesses.
Right, and weighting occurs on that already.
We do not have a local preference with that either. We do.
It's not local, but it is weighted. No matter where the vendor happens to be located, it's weighted toward those categories.
No.
There is no weight.
No, I'm sorry. We do not have a weight on that. We do take additional efforts to ensure minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, emerging small businesses know of the opportunities, and will directly email MWB ESBs that have been identified. However, we do not, when we receive the bids or when we receive the proposals, there is not a weight that is added to that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But Oregon does, is what you're getting at, right? And you mentioned earlier that Oregon has the weight on that?
Not that applies to Lane County.
Right, but Oregon is a.
We encourage those. We encourage that the departments reach out to those and invite those. Yes, we encourage them to invite those business types to bid on our projects so that they do not miss out on the opportunity to do so. But it is not weighted in any fashion. It is just an encouragement, like, hey, this opportunity is available. If you would like to, please apply.
And I think I see where I got my misinformation on that, is that there's a percentage rate, a percentage variance is allowed on the bid. You can accept bids 5% above, for instance, if it is made with recycled materials, and that's state of Oregon, not Lane County.
Yes, those are Oregon.
Those are and that's where my kind of cross-track occurred. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This really digs in on the assignment. I think when I first made it, it was really, it generally focused on Health and Human Services, but this is, clearly an issue for various departments. So a countywide look on it, I appreciate. I kind of hone in on what is local, right? Is it Oregon? Is it Lane County? Is it these minority-owned businesses? Like, what do we want? And my original concept when I put the assignment together was Oregon, like everything in Oregon, Oregon-based. And I still feel very strongly that the way that our government agencies function, if we had a preference for our local economy, then that would only strengthen our businesses and community engagement. And I don't want to get sidelined by whatever federal or state regulations are out there, but I still feel very strongly that we should really focus on how we can support our local economy. And a way in which governments can participate in doing that is by having a local preference of some kind. But it's clear that with what you presented, that we still need to dig in some more. And you had mentioned that you had this procurement committee, and if they're open and willing and structured in a way in which they could help, delve into some of these questions about how can we support our local economy, but also not, go sideways with whatever legal ramifications that we need to follow. That would be really helpful information for us. And of course, that would engage our council to do some of that work. And the fact that, people talk about it, or at least you've heard people in other agencies talk about it, but nobody come to a conclusion is, to me, kind of questions, okay, is there political will? Is there, legal constraints, which is very possible? Are there community members that are coming forward that saying this is something that's important to us? And I have heard personally that this is something important to us. We always hear buy local from our local chambers, et cetera. So I would like to advance this, to dig in some more if there's the will from this board.
Mr. Lovell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, this is great thinking things. I think the comment that Commissioner Farr made about 46% of our vendors we use and 55% of our money, I think we're doing pretty good. I mean, overall, if I was to look at that, I would be concerned if we were at 30% or 25%. And I had two questions that Council Emily brought up, and they were actually, now as I read them again, they're really only one, is how much work and money and staff time and expense would we be continually expending on sharpening our pencil to make sure we are in compliance going forward? That's a consideration of money that we would spend that may or may not actually help us. So that's one question. And then the second question is, do these local preferences need to be formally declared, or can we just have an overall mission statement of the county to say, hey, at all points possible, we're going to try to go local if that local definition is statewide, without having to actually declare it so that it's not formally in the court system, if that's something I can throw out there. I don't know, just a thought.
If it would probably to be applied equitably across all of the departments, and we would need to have a policy in place to be able to do that. And we would need to have parameters as to, like when and how, and define the who and geographic boundaries and all of those particular things. And then we would need to do a very deep analysis of the chances of litigation of a policy of this magnitude. It's not zero.
You brought up the 55% spend with local vendors. I found it, I appreciate the assignment. I genuinely appreciate the assignment, because I think that, at least in my 3 years with the county, that's the first time I've really dug in to see what do we spend with local vendors. And so when the numbers spun and it came up and said 55%, is that good? Right? I did find examples out there. I reached out to my regional procurement leads, and some of them from other agencies did come back with their numbers. 17% was one. In the state of Washington, there was a county up there, 29%. So when you look at that, 55% looks good. I would, going forward, that is a metric that I want to track, right? Because to me, that's where, now we know, okay, we spent 55% last year. Could we improve upon that next year? Can that trajectory climb? And what can we do to help that climb?
Build more roads.
Was that just a fiscal year? Is that?
That's a calendar year. That was calendar year 2025.
Yeah, it would be interesting year over year. So we have major projects or not that would really tilt it.
And it took a considerable amount of effort to actually get that data. And that's something else also. I need to go back and look at how we classify our purchase, our spend. And I think there's a way that we can do that much easier. But anyways, I genuinely appreciate the assignment because it had me focus in on that. And it's something that we're going to continue tracking.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you're digging into it, and now we have the starting point, we have a baseline. So that's really important for us to move forward. And maybe we don't do anything right now, but we just say, okay, thanks for the baseline, let's kick this down the road a little bit and revisit it. I mean, this to me almost sounds like we're spending 90% of our time making ourselves 10% better in one of those kind of chases. So maybe rather than doing that up front, maybe we give itself a little bit of mileage and then see where we're at. So that would be my recommendation. Yeah, go ahead.
Were there any higher than us at 55? You mentioned a couple that were lower.
By far, the response I heard is that we do not track that.
So everybody that tracked, nobody was higher. The numbers you got.
No, the responses I received, no.
Not even close.
No.
So maybe that's our first priority is just keeping track of it and making sure we're doing the best we can. Because there's a lot of unintended consequences in there, in that list that I hadn't thought of until, so I mean, I appreciate this presentation as well. I could see the strain on vendor relationships and people that have a good relationship with a vendor, they might not be local, but some of that stuff's hard to put a price on. So yeah, I see a lot of conundrums here.
I have a quick question, Chair.
Yeah, please.
And regarding our CBB, Community Benefits Bidding Program, is that completely separate and protected from this discussion? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
What was the definition of local for the purposes of this research?
We send a payment to an address that's within Lane County.
So that's pretty specific scope.
Very specific scope.
55%, that's even higher.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So as an example, Equitable Social Solutions, they're based in Medford.
Right.
So that would be non-local is for the purpose of this discussion.
If Lane County is how we define local as opposed to Oregon.
Correct.
Right. But also then a mailing address versus corporate headquarters.
Right.
Right.
Also different. Interesting. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Council?
Just a brief comment in terms of moving forward and watching things, as the Commissioner mentioned. I would agree with Council that the Dormant Commerce Clause is a real impediment, and it should be treated as such. And really what that's about is looking at contracts and procurements where potentially an out-of-state vendor could be bidding or providing the service.
Yes.
And if we can find contracts where that's extremely unlikely, or you would really have to be a local vendor to really bid, then there's a little more safety there. But it's my impression over time, having looked into this really over the course of my career, that as technology advances and the world becomes smaller, the chances of that happening are very less and less. There's likely going to be out-of-state potential bidders for just about anything you can dream up now. Having said that, I will say this. The Dormant Commerce Clause itself is on tenuous footing. There are a number of Supreme Court justices who have expressed in opinions or publicly that they question whether the doctrine is valid. They have not struck it down yet. They may never strike it down. But I will tell you, if and when the U.S. Supreme Court ever strikes down the Dormant Commerce Clause, a whole bunch of people are going to having this exact conversation very rapidly, because a lot of the limitations may disappear. We still have the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause to be aware of and compliant with, but things may ease up. But just suffice to say that your county council is extremely nervous about local preferences, where anyone from out of state could be a potential bidder.
Yes, one more, and this is a clarifying question. We have a vendor here in the building that recently we switched to Sanapac, hauling our garbage and our recyclables. Sanapac is a local company, but their U.S. headquarters, they have multinational headquarters, but the U.S. headquarters is in Texas. Are they considered local because they have a local office, or is that, where is that in that 55%? Are they in the 45 or in the 55?
I would assume, because I did go through the top vendors that we purchased from, I would assume that they would be considered local. If they have a local office, then we're sending payment to them here locally. I would assume they would be local.
Okay.
As compared to WellPath, if you're familiar with WellPath, we provide medical services for the county at different facilities. They're based in Tennessee, right? So they are non-local.
They don't have a local, so the fact that there's a local, okay, good. I may have more questions independently on that.
There's a lot of little nuances there that we would have to.
Where does the profit go? So that's.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. Yeah, that's the whole reason I kind of brought this up, is because we want that to be recycled in our own community and people being able to spend that here. And that's why I think it's worth, more conversation. I appreciate that we've got the metrics and you're going to be tracking them. I would challenge other agencies to do the same, because some of the money that we spend at government services go to large corporations on the other side of the nation. And it's really important that we help support our local community. And if there's any way that we can kind of bend our policy towards being able to support the local economy, this is the way I think governments could do it within the constraints of the law.
Another risk of being laughed at, which I know I get laughed at about this, but it's Jerry's versus Home Depot, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, well, do you need more direction from us at this point, or where are we at on this with you, Sean?
We would like to consider this assignment, at least this first phase of the assignment, closed.
Okay.
And if the board wishes to give us an additional assignment, we can follow up, we can, take that on. Again, I will be tracking that metric. Perhaps I report back on that metric. Every 6 months, every quarter, once a year, whatever the board wishes, but maybe it's an annual thing on the previous year. But yeah, we would like to consider the assignment, this particular assignment closed, and then
I think you would get head nods to continue to keep track of where our stuff is being purchased from, what our Lane County percentage is.
So not the full assignment, but just that little segment of it?
Just an update from our...
Is a report back annually, an annual report, either in writing, sent to the board, or in a board, would that be sufficient?
It would suffice for me, but...
Well, I want information available on demand.
Like Jerry's.
So maybe we can take that as direction to continue tracking the information, provide a report back to the board annually, and close this assignment.
Sure.
I'm looking to the maker of the assignment to see if this satisfies.
Well, I'm a little disappointed, I must say, because I would like to dig into it more, if at the very least having the procurement committee review some of the details, and but if that's not, the preference of the board, then that's the way it is.
I'm sure we'd always be up for an assignment at a later date too, learn more about it. I've got I'll just say there's more risks and concerns than I had originally thought, and I kind of want to take some time to mull that around myself. But
Was there opposition? I mean, procurement committee, maybe this work is going to spark some conversation at that committee level. We're not saying don't have those conversations. So I would like to think that this work goes somewhere with that committee to start thinking about how else might we slice it and dice it to better understand where the opportunity is to meet this goal of keeping local dollars circulating locally. We are spending public dollars. It would be nice if we could maximize their benefit to the public here in our community, whether that's Lane County or Oregon. So hopefully there's just conversation on your committee as a result of some of this that sparks a little more of that can be considered as you continue to track and monitor and be part of the next report back. That might help us shape a more specific assignment. Yeah, that'd be great.
we have an upcoming procurement advisory team meeting, and I will add that to the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Helpful. Thank you, Mr. Councilor Barrio.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on at this point, I believe, to Public Works, item 9A. Work session on ordinance 2507. Thanks, man. That was in the hot seat. Okay. Just starting off with Mr. Gilbride.
It's actually going to be Rachel.
Seriously. All right.
One moment while my notes do that.
Kevin was looking at me like he was ready to go.
Yeah, I'm always ready. All right, thank you, Chair Senega, and good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Rachel Surklove, Senior Planner. Also with me today is Kevin Gilbride, Senior Planner, and Ann Davies, our Assistant County Counsel, who's been helping us with this project. So staff were last before you with Ordinance 2507 on March 17th, 2026, at which time the board moved to hold a work session on the ordinance today and hold a 7th reading on April 14th, 2026. Since March 17th, staff have been working with LCOG, Lane Council of Governments, to coordinate with stakeholders who have interest in developing code amendments that they think are necessary for completing this project. LCOG held a stakeholder meeting with local land use attorneys on March 31st and with Lane County staff on April 1st. The results of these meetings were draft code concepts that staff received from the land use attorneys via LCOG and a table of additional legal issues that was originally drafted and disseminated by Mike Reeder on March 17th. LCOG then took that table and added a place for Lane County Legal Counsel to add their response to the issues. Today's staff will be mainly responding to the code concepts and draft provided by the land use attorneys. These items were forwarded to the board yesterday. And first, I'm going to discuss staff's issues with the riparian code amendments that are proposed, and then I'll hand it over to Kevin to discuss other sections of code. Okay, so the attorneys provided a legislative version of the draft code amendments to Lane Code 16253, which are the riparian regulations, and there are two changes that were made. First, a sentence was added to the purpose of the code, and stating that the riparian regulations, as acknowledged in compliance with Goal 5, are clear and objective. And the second change was to add the word indigenous in regards to vegetation removal within the riparian setback area. So first I'm going to talk about the term indigenous. The existing code inconsistently uses the term indigenous in regards to vegetation removal, and staff do not believe that this term is clear and objective. The term is defined in 16090, and that definition I have for you up on the slide. However, there is subjectivity to this term, and early on in the project, staff did consider what it would take to make this current term clear and objective. We understand that making this term clear and objective would involve creating a list of indigenous or native vegetation that the standards of this code would then apply to specifically. Firstly, we don't believe that that's the intent of the riparian regulations. We believe that there's benefit to all vegetation that exists within the riparian setback area, even vegetation that's considered invasive. Vegetation of all kinds increases bank stability, it creates habitat, and provides shading of waterways, which helps keep water temperatures at a level that promotes natural habitat. So there's benefit in not distinguishing between those two types of vegetation within the riparian setback area. Secondly, to develop a list of invasive species or indigenous vegetation would require time and coordination with experts, and that list would have to be adopted with this ordinance. We ran into several questions about the level of detail required to create such a list. What species should and should not be considered native, especially when there are benefits to maintaining all vegetation in the riparian setback area, as compared to allowing setback areas to be cleared of all vegetation, if the vegetation were invasive. Staff found that digging into this aspect of the code was outside of the scope of this project, so we chose to not to add or remove any reference to the term indigenous in the proposed ordinance, and to continue implementing this aspect of the code as we currently do. So the second matter of disagreement about the current code not being clear and objective, the land use attorneys believe that the riparian code is already clear and objective and warrants no changes. Staff agree that there are aspects of this code that are clear and objective, such as the riparian setback area and the area of vegetation permitted to be removed. However, there are questions regarding where locationally vegetation is allowed to be removed in the setback area. That aspect of the code is not clear and objective, and in staff's opinion, and thus we're proposing amendments to the riparian code section. One more thing. So staff believes that there is little detriment to adopting the changes that we've proposed in the ordinance. The land use attorneys believe that this code is already clear and objective, and they may or may not be correct in that opinion. However, staff believes that the regulations can be interpreted as discretionary, and that there's enough risk that they'll be found as discretionary to warrant making the amendments that we've proposed to the section. The attorney's argument has been that the proposed ordinance then will be redundant if there's two clear and objective pathways. But staff believes that the risk of the code being interpreted as discretionary is greater than having two redundant permitting pathways, for which there really is no legal risk, because we're not taking away any allowance that's already in the riparian code. We're simply adding a pathway that we believe is clear and objective to comply with House Bill 3197. So that covers it for riparian, and I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to talk about other code sections.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, commissioners. I'll apologize a little bit because I'm going to talk for a while, but I was advised to be detailed. As Rachel stated, through collaboration with LCOG and the stakeholders, county staff received proposed substitute standards for housing that stakeholders assert can be inserted into the staff recommended clear and objective standards for the coastal overlay zones, Land Code 16237 through 241, and the Willamette River Greenway overlay zone, Land Code 16254. We first received proposed changes on March 31st and prepared a presentation in response for the proposed changes, but late April 2nd, LCOG forwarded a revised version of the stakeholders' proposed code changes, and I'll address the April 2nd version instead of the original March 31st. I believe you all should have a copy of those. We sent them yesterday. Jessica sent them yesterday, but I'll show you each proposed section on the PowerPoint. And in a general sense, county staff thanks the stakeholders for providing their suggested language, but we must refute it, and I'll tell you why. The stakeholders propose inserting a set of 6 criteria into 6 different sections of code. Each section they propose inserting the criteria implements a different set of discretionary standards to provide protections for a natural resource or a sensitive area of some kind. The discretionary criteria in each of those code sections is derived from the county comprehensive plan policies, in some cases word for word, and from state laws, also in some cases word for word. The stakeholders' proposed language for insertion does not acknowledge that reality. Instead, their proposed standards focus almost entirely on Class 1 streams, and vegetation removal standards for those mapped areas. Their proposal makes the base assumption that the only thing that matters is vegetation removal, and it only matters in riparian areas. And so their changes are premised on an assumption that has no merit. In the county's proposed code for this process, the standards were derived by tabling out each of the discretionary criteria applicable to the housing for each code section, which includes provisions like reducing erosion, protecting habitats, limiting water use, conserving viewpoints and vistas, reducing topographic modifications of the site, developing away from slopes, blending exterior building material colors with the surrounding vegetation, etc. And for each of those criteria, we either developed a correlating clear and objective standard, or if possible, we omitted the standard. Those tables were provided to you back in October. The stakeholders' suggested revision shows no effort to accomplish that. I'll drill it down a little more specifically. So to start, the stakeholders provide, in a non-coastal zone, a party may seek and obtain approval for housing, including accessory structures, or to expand, replace, or alter such housing or accessory structures by submitting a Type 1 application pursuant to Lane Code Chapter 14, notwithstanding any other housing approval standards which otherwise may apply. The application shall be approved if it meets these standards. This standard is insufficient. It appears to have been somewhat derived from staff's proposed Lane Code 16254 amendments for the Greenway, where staff imposed a requirement for review of housing proposals under a Type 1 application. This requirement is not included in any of the coastal overlay zones that we provided amendments for. In effect, the stakeholders are proposing adding a new application requirement in those zones. The county's proposed intro language was tailored to each section, and the stakeholders didn't make an effort to do that. Further, the proposed intro clause inserts an allowance for property owners to establish accessory structures under the housing provisions. This exceeds the scope of this project. The county excluded accessory structures from the proposed definition of housing for two reasons. First, being that House Bill 3197 does not require it. And second, to align with the Roberts v. City of Cannon Beach case, we provided an in-depth analysis of the reasoning for that in our December 2nd, 2025 memo to the board. But the gist is that ancillary development that is not housing is treated as not housing to ensure life and safety protections from natural hazards. An example of that would be landslide risks from building on steep slopes. And the proposed standards exempt housing from this kind of discretionary review, which simplifies the process, or the county's proposed standards exempt housing from this kind of discretionary review, which simplifies the process for, as the board states, is their desire to allow for more front doors in Lane County. And accessory structures have nothing to do with more front doors. In order to ensure protection from natural hazards and to alleviate risk for the county to experience future litigation in the event that an accessory structure that was not required by state law to be allowed under clear and objective provisions experiences some kind of unforeseen failure that may have been addressed through a discretionary process, accessory structures must be omitted. Under subsection A, the stakeholders provide housing as defined by Lane Code 16090 is an allowed use of the property. In the context of the stakeholders provided code, this provision makes sense. However, the county in the county versions of the amendments, this requirement is baked into the intro with the inclusion of the phrase housing as defined in LC 16090. The two provisions accomplish the same goal in different ways, so there's no need to add this provision to the county's proposed code. Under subsections B and C, the stakeholders provide two versions of a minimum setback from Class 1 streams designated by the Rural Comprehensive Plan, a 50-foot for non-resource zones and a 100-foot for resource zones. This standard is improper for several reasons. First, because it inserts accessory structures into the approval criteria for the development of housing. As I said, accessory structures are expressly excluded from the definition included with this proposed ordinance. It appears, or I don't know, the stakeholders are attempting to add in provisions that are not required by state law, it seems like. Second, And most importantly, their proposed standard is insufficient to satisfy the policy-neutral mandate that the board gave county staff for this process. The ordinary high water setback regulations for each of the coastal overlays are derived directly from the Rural Comprehensive Plan and range from 50 feet to 100 feet and have nothing to do with whether a property is zoned resource or non-resource. Additionally, the coastal zones do not limit their required setbacks from water bodies to Class 1 streams. The overlay zone specific setbacks apply to coastal lakes or estuaries. The county cannot remove this requirement without a comprehensive plan amendment, which is an entirely different process from what we are doing here. Also, as I stated previously, restrictions for development within the minimum setbacks for Class 1 streams are in Lane Code 16253, not the coastal or greenway overlays. Where both are present on a property, both apply. There is no need to reference the riparian standards in these coastal and greenway code sections. Additionally, the stakeholders propose that their subsections B and C should replace staff's minimum 300-foot setback in the Greenway Code. It's insufficient for that purpose. Under the current Greenway Code and per the policies of the Rural Comprehensive Plan, we are required to enforce the maximum feasible extent the protection of the vegetative fringe within the Greenway, which is Goal 15, Policy 19 of the RCP, in order to protect, maintain, and preserve and enhance the river's natural and scenic qualities, which is Goal 15, Policy 11, by directing development away from the river to the greatest extent possible, which is Goal 15, Policy 10. These requirements have traditionally been accomplished through a minimum setback of 100 feet and a balancing of 17 discretionary standards reviewed through a Type 2 permit. An example of one of the 17 discretionary standards is provided here. Just this one criteria uses multiple discretionary terms, such as protects or enhances, maximum landscape area or open space, and significantly removed. For your understanding, these terms are discretionary because they apply unmeasurable standards. Their interpretation is up for grabs. Staff's proposed 300-foot setback satisfies both the requirements of the Rural Comprehensive Plan policies and this listed discretionary standard and most of these other 16 standards shown here by establishing a single greatly increased setback of, from what is allowed under a normal Type 2 process. We developed this increased setback because based on staff's experience and research, the Type 2 process nearly always results in an even greater setback than the existing 100-foot requirement, unless there's some discretionarily devised alternative. For Greenway, the gist of the issue is really just this. Under the old discretionary process, the properties that were reviewed and approved through special use permits were required to site their development further back than 100, 200, 300, or even more feet unless they had some mitigating realities on the site. The stakeholders' proposed criteria of a 50-foot setback doesn't even come close to satisfying that reality. For example, a property owner might propose their dwelling 100 feet back from the ordinary high water line and justify the location's lack of impact on the natural scenic qualities of the river by hiding it from view behind a copse of trees, or by painting the house a neutral natural color, or by proposing extensive riparian vegetation replanting, or all of these. All of these options or mitigations are subjective, discretionary considerations included in the current code. A clear and objective process cannot rely on site-specific or proposal-specific nuances. So the 300-foot setback is effectively an insurance policy because House Bill 3197 took away the county's ability to micromanage the placement of dwellings to protect this greenway resource. We have to set a minimum setback for enough to protect the resource automatically, and we believe that a 300-foot setback is as close as it can be through a non-discretionary review process. In addition to violating the base 100-foot setback of the Greenway Code, the stakeholders' proposed language doesn't even acknowledge the reality of the complexity of balancing the other discretionary criteria rolled under the staff's proposed 300-foot setback. Oh, I didn't put the 16 up. That's why you always look at your presentation. Those are the other 16 discretionary criteria. I wasn't going to read them because it's a lot. Mini break. So under subsection D, the stakeholders provide, except as provided in subsection 2 below, removal of indigenous vegetation within the setback areas described in subsections 1B and 1C shall comply with the standards, compliance provisions, and exceptions in Lane Code 16253 sub 2. Again, this is improper and insufficient. None of the 6 code sections that the stakeholders propose to include this provision within currently allow for removal of riparian vegetation. And as I've said a couple times already, riparian vegetation removal is subject to the provisions of Lane Code 16253, not the coastal or greenway codes. To provide an outright removal allowance, either through reference to the riparian code section or by adding similar language to these sections, would not constitute a policy-neutral amendment to the code, as it would no longer provide equal protection for the resource area to what is currently provided by the code. The coastal and greenway codes are separate regulations from the riparian regulations. Lumping the two together like this is both unnecessary because both regulations already apply when a riparian resource is located on a property, also mapped within a coastal or greenway overlay, and because cross-referencing separate overlay zones would massively complicate code implementation by adding an extra step of staff review of criteria that may or may not apply, and by adding extra complexity to review for the general public themselves. Finally, this proposed provision assumes that the vegetation removal standards in each of these sections solely relates to the riparian areas, and that's incorrect. Staff's proposed vegetation removal standard is designed to satisfy the code and rural comprehensive plan requirements to limit all vegetation removal in almost all of the coastal and greenway overlay zones. The regulations enforce limitations for the sake of limiting soil erosion, geologic stability, habitat conservation, maintaining water quality, and protecting and conserving the natural, scenic, historic, cultural, economic, and recreational qualities of Lane County. The stakeholders' focus on riparian vegetation is not only improper in these overlay zones, but it also accomplishes none of the required protections for these sensitive natural resources. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge this is a lot of text. However, under their subsection 2, the stakeholders attempt to provide an expansive exemption for ancillary development to housing from review under the resource overlay zones. However, it does not accomplish what the stakeholders appear to be hoping. From what staff can understand regarding this section, the stakeholders are hoping to lump all potential ancillary development to housing or development that almost always occurs when you are building a house, such as a driveway access, access to public utilities, access to water, sanitation, along with some other things that do not, such as primary and secondary fire breaks and stormwater facilities under a single exemption for review. But the code that the county has provided already accomplishes the stakeholders' goal where it is actually necessary. For example, in the coastal and greenway provisions, access is exempted from the vegetation removal standards. And for beaches and dunes, a specific provision is written in for vegetation removal ancillary to sanitation disposal development. For the other items that normally come with development, such as water and utility access, these are not reviewed by planning, other than to verify that the well is safe and provides enough water pursuant to the provisions of Lane Manual. As for fire breaks, housing as defined is only allowed in rural residential zones, which do not require fire breaks. Finally, lumping in stormwater is honestly strange because these facilities wouldn't constitute vegetation removal, as they generally result in a net positive vegetation gain for properties. To close out my section, I want to cement a couple things now that we finally have proposed changes from the stakeholders. The stakeholders are proposing a code insertion for resource protection zones that is solely focused on riparian vegetation and the potential impact of vegetation removal within that area. These zones have some reference to and give some thought to the riparian area by providing minimum setbacks from water resources, but they don't specifically regulate the riparian areas, nor are they meant to. That is what Lane Code 16253 is for. The code that staff developed and presented to you all over the past year accomplishes everything that the stakeholders seem to want. The only difference is that the stakeholders' proposed code does not satisfy all of the requirements of the regulatory documents that we're required to work with, whereas the county's version does. That's all from me for now. Rachel's going to close us out.
Thanks, Kevin. So that was a good summary of those additional code sections, but I just want to give a couple of bottom lines for the project as a whole. So the key takeaways from this presentation were we wanted to go through the details of the code amendments that we've received from the land use attorneys. The bottom line here is that what they're proposing does not address the purpose of this project or the issues at hand. Staff maintains that their understanding of the riparian code is that it's not clear and objective and it requires amendments with clear and objective criteria to be legally defensible in light of House Bill 3197. The amendments provided by the stakeholders don't achieve this. The proposed substitute standards for housing that the land use attorney stakeholders propose for the Greenway and coastal overlay codes is essentially non-functional. The proposed language does not relate to the purpose of those code sections and proposes lesser protections of the natural resources that the codes are in place to protect. And the last point that we would like to make is that if the board directs staff to incorporate the land use attorney's changes into the ordinance, the county is at a higher risk of appeal for this ordinance, and there's a greater risk that an enforcement order, possibly resulting in a stay in development, will be issued for the county. Additionally, these proposed code changes leave natural resources unprotected, or if the county tries to protect them using the existing discretionary criteria, we will be welcoming appeals of our local land use decisions. Alternatively, if we adopt the ordinance proposed by staff, the ordinance may still be appealed, but we will at least have established a clear and objective standards that protect the natural resources that were meant to be protected by our comprehensive plan and by the statewide planning goals. And so lastly, while this is a work session just to provide information and there's no action being taken today, I do want to note that staff is still in support of the ordinance that we have drafted and brought before you. This ordinance can be adopted as is at the 7th reading coming up on April 14th. If the board wishes to see changes to that ordinance based on the feedback from local land use attorneys, then that direction should be given today or it can be given on the 14th. And then staff has tentatively scheduled additional readings to happen in May if the board wishes to see an alternative version adopted. So that concludes our presentation, and I'll hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from council or to the board?
I didn't have anything in there if you wanted to say.
Nothing from me.
Okay, to the board. Commissioner Farr.
I'm going to have very little to say today as I absorb all of this, because you're right on everything and they're wrong on everything, right?
I agreed with sub A to limit their housing as defined by LC 16090 is allowed and is allowed use on the property. I have no disagreement with that other than that it's already included in our version.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So I just want to frame it a little bit differently too, in terms of level of risk. It's not, I don't think it's really productive to view it as like the ordinance that we've proposed is the right ordinance and the ordinance they propose is the wrong ordinance. But if we look at it as a level of risk, I think there's a lot of reasons that the ordinance that we've developed has less risk associated with it, because we've developed an ordinance that implements all of the guiding regulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Okay.
So the risk that we're talking about, I'm trying to determine what is the nature, what's the genesis of the risk. So who is at risk? It's a risk of appeal, correct? That's a principal risk. And the risk of losing an appeal. So I'm trying to gather who is going to appeal it. Where is this risk? What's the genesis of the risk?
We already received.
Who are we at risk from?
Landwatch. Well, so, I mean,
You
it
said
gets
it.
back to the petition. I think part of what is being discussed is the risk of a citizen-initiated enforcement petition. So we've already gotten the notice of intent for the petition for enforcement at DLCD from Landwatch. And so we've given them a response. They have not yet filed a formal petition, but I think part of the risk that they're talking about is the risk of this citizen-initiated enforcement action going forward.
So less the risk of land use attorneys and more the risk of citizen action.
Yeah, there are attorneys involved.
Well, there are, of course, but
Yeah, and
see,
also-
and I'm trying to figure out what we as the board, as policymakers, what risk do we're the assigners of risk, right? As the policymakers, we're the ones who determine what risk is acceptable and where the risk should come from, and I'll take it back to the charter to describe that. But with that being said, I'm a little bit concerned about some of the language in here that I need to digest a little bit more before I can give you reasonable recommendations. You know, for instance, riparian, regarding indigenous species, what is and what isn't. Of course, it's be almost impossible to derive a list of what is our indigenous species. You know, I was a general manager of Gray's Garden Centers, and we sold a lot of indigenous species because people wanted that. The list is extensive. Nobody would expect you to derive that list, but wouldn't it be more reasonable to begin to compile a list of things that you can take out because they are noxious or invasive and choke out indigenous species? And that list could be initially a short list. Tansy ragwort, for instance. And you know, you don't need to respond to this because unless I can pull out Tansy ragwort at will on the riverbanks, if you can respond to that.
It's more that when we first started drafting these changes, we discussed doing this and both on either side of creating a list of species you could remove or creating a list of species.
I wasn't in that discussion, so.
Yeah, no, I'm just giving this for your information. And what we found was that it's a more complicated conversation than we would like it to be.
And even you would like it to be.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I would love for it to be straightforward, like we just adopt a list that says what the indigenous species and what the non-indigenous species are. But there's this question, and it's a academic question, but it'll come up, and it's how do you define indigenous, and when does that period begin and end? And we got to that question, and we considered that it's not our purview to do that.
I would contend that you don't have to define indigenous species. I would contend that you can identify species that can be removed indiscretionately. And for instance, we have noxious weeds that are choking out indigenous species, and I can go into my pasture in Tillamook, my family's pasture in Tillamook, and there's tansy today that wasn't there yesterday. So can I pull it out because it's next to the Trash River? Well, maybe not. So I have to make a phone call. I've got a couple of tansies showed up on the banks. Can I take them out? They weren't there last week. They are there this week. That's not clear to me that it can be done based upon the ordinance as it is written right now. And so if you can in one sentence give me clarity that yes, I can remove the tansy ragwort, then that probably will come close to resolving my concern with the removal of non-indigenous species. And that's a term I'm using because there are probably people who could argue that tansies are indigenous because they've been here a long time, and gosh, they're indigenous by now. But there's also the noxious nature of them that is defined. They are an illegal plant to sell in Oregon. You can't sell them. Same with English ivy. You can't sell it. Can I take the English ivy off the trees? So if I can't, then I got a problem with this ordinance.
Well, the way that the riparian regulations work is that if you're going to remove vegetation from the riparian area and you are exceeding what your vegetation removal allowance is, then you need to replace it. So you're asking us a black and white question of whether something is indigenous or non-indigenous and whether you can remove it. But the answer really is that, like, sure, you can remove vegetation, but you got to replace it. And that's what the ordinance says, and that's what the existing code says.
How does the ordinance then cover accumulation of plants on the riverbank? So today I'm meeting the ordinance, but more plants have grown there since I met the standards of the riparian zone vegetation removal. How does it cover that? I mean, what if these tensies do show up, and they do show up overnight? English ivy, you can watch it grow.
It doesn't. It doesn't account for time. That's what's so difficult about this specific ordinance, is that you're trying to regulate something that doesn't exist. We can only take one snapshot of it and know how it exists in that moment, but we're trying to regulate it over time.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm trying to get a grasp on for this ordinance. Me as a riverbank property owner, which Tillamook County is different, but you know, the fact is, if these things show up inside this 300-foot zone, and they weren't there last week, they are there this week, and I can't take them out, but they're at risk of destroying my more appreciated species that are there. And, you know, some states have declared tansy ragwort. We have declared English ivy. They're noxious species that we do not want. You're saying we've got to keep.
I mean, well, what we're saying is you can remove them. The riparian regulations allow you to remove a certain amount of vegetation within the riparian setback area.
Clearly.
So you can remove them. And then I think what Kevin was pointing out was that if, say, you have an invasive species and you want to remove all of that invasive species and that removal exceeds the limitations, then there is a code pathway, an application that you apply for, where you can remove in excess of the limitations. You just have to replant with native species. So there is.
But we don't know what native species are because we don't have the list.
In that type of application, we work with the water habitat.
It's also a discretionary application.
Yeah.
Discretionary.
There is a type 1 option for you, for property owners. If they work with the Soil Water Conservation District and get approval from ODFW, then they can skip the discretionary path and do a riparian enhancement plan. And that's what most property owners do, and when they're planning on doing a major modification in the riparian zone. And so the pathway exists.
And clearly
we
I'm
use
not
it
talking
all
about
the
major
time.
modifications. I'm talking about
Well,
ad hoc.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's a $170 application, and it's processed in usually a week or less. And
But I don't have to pay $170 to take out tansy ragwort that showed up this week.
well, I think I kind of feel like we're losing track in this conversation.
But no, help me out. I'm asking for help on this. Would I have to pay $170 fee to remove a little field of tansies that showed up on the riverbank?
Not if you're within the limits of vegetation removal.
But if I'm at the limit,
Then there's an exception that Kevin was talking about.
But we're also focusing on something we can't change through this ordinance. What we're doing is creating clear and objective standards for the development of housing, and we're leaving the rest of the ordinance as is. And you're talking about something that we would need to change the entire code section for, and something that we might need to modify the rural comprehensive plan for, and maybe go through a Goal 5 analysis and a full review of our inventory of Goal 5 resources in the county.
so then assure me that this ordinance in no way further inhibits my ability to remove noxious species from my own property.
Well, it doesn't change your current ability, so.
It does not, yeah, because we're only creating a clear and objective pathway for housing. So if your proposal only has to do with modifying vegetation in the riparian setback independent from a development proposal, then this project does not affect that.
Good, that's good clarity, thank you. So we're moving, and I'm looking at the financial implication. You talk about how much staff time it's cost. I'm worried about what it's going to cost in the future. Staff time, you know, work on projects on a regular basis. So the financial consideration that you've given to us here is all based upon how much staff time has been spent since the discussion was extended. Well, the extension of the discussion was necessary, and it continues to be necessary because what we propose in this ordinance is from here on. And if there are code changes that need to come that are highlighted by the passage of this ordinance, then we need to begin to work on the code changes. And Kevin, I'm trying to follow your language, and it's really difficult because it's language you speak, and it's not language that I speak. And when you're referring to codes, I don't have all those codes right here in front of me, so I can't just indiscriminately click on code 15010, then okay, I understand that now. So, but making certain that the ordinance does not provide inhibitions for the development of housing any greater than state law applies. That is something that I will always be pushing toward. And I need simpler terms from you on a regular basis that help me to understand that. Because as of right now, I'm not convinced that you just didn't kind of just shine any information that was given to you and just come back with the same things you'd already given us before. So, as we move toward the passage of this ordinance, what I would like to see is a choice. This is the way the ordinance is written, and this is the language that will be used if we adopted what is being recommended by you call them stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. That was provided yesterday. It's the package of material that LCOG put together, which included a summary of the outreach that they did, and then it also attached to that was the legislative code amendment version from the land use attorneys for the riparian code that had the two changes that I talked about. And then there was another sheet of paper that was just a set of 6 standards that wasn't a legislative version. So we don't really know where they imagined that information going. It was just a set of criteria that they provided, and so we can only take that and understand that those are the amendments that they want.
Thank you. So what I just asked for was given at some time point during the day yesterday, which I've not in the last few hours had a chance to review all of that. So we've been working on this a long, long time. In the last few hours, I was given this. Okay, all right. Well, that gives me a pause to take time to reflect on what has been suggested. It is important at this point in time that what we move forward with is the best that we can possibly do, not in fear of one set of appellants or another set of appellants, but in consideration that anybody might appeal this, and that doing the best thing, not for who we fear is going to appeal it, but for the people we serve.
I came in around 3 o'clock yesterday or something like that, 2 o'clock.
I'm not sure when that was sent out to you.
It was at 3 o'clock yesterday. I was in human services.
Yeah, so
discussions
just
at
to be
length,
clear, a lot of stuff was happening in the last minute. So LCOG packaged it and we just got it.
We got it on Friday.
But there was also something new that we got
on Monday.
Since Friday.
I know, I was
thought. So anyway, we got it to you as soon as we could.
Yeah.
And thank you.
And took this time to, what we just went over was in detail, every point everything that was provided to us, we went over that in detail, was the purpose of this work session.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, lots of stuff coming at us last minute, every meeting that this is on our agenda. And I just remain frustrated and baffled. I think we all are a little bit. But there's an opportunity and a process for these kinds of concerns to be raised, and the folks that are now raising them did not avail themselves of the process and show up during Planning Commission meetings and work with staff in the course of events. So here we are trying to litigate it here. I would really like to not be interrupted. I really would.
Okay.
So, we got an email 20 minutes before we gavelled in the last time this was on our agenda from Mr. Reeder, which he sent to all of us and copied attorneys and several private emails of commissioners saying at the last sentence, it is not legally defensible. So getting to this issue of we are the assigners of risk, and getting to the point that Council Davies brought up, that we have this letter indicating a potential enforcement action. Can attorneys please help me understand the difference between what is at risk to the county, that is our responsibility, not to individual applicants. For example, we are obligated to protect the county. So an enforcement action is what kind of risk versus passing an ordinance that then moves out into the realm of applicants get to decide whether they do or don't want to try to appeal based on a specific application. What is the difference in risk? Because those are the two possible paths we're on, it seems to me.
Sure. I'll do my best to tackle that. Certainly there is risk of someone directly appealing this ordinance to LUBA and arguing that it is not in compliance with law because it's not, for example, clear and objective. They can attack the substance of it, saying this is not clear and objective. LUBA, please send it back to county to try again. There's risk in that. There is risk in, as you kind of alluded to, individual applicants applying under the ordinance, maybe, say, getting a denial and saying, hey, either the subjective path isn't right or the objective path is not right. It's not clear and objective, and taking it up on more of a case-by-case basis. There's risk of that. There's also risk of a petition for an enforcement order with LCDC being filed. We've already received the notice of that potential from Landwatch asking LCDC to put an enforcement order in place to essentially direct the county to get this done in a timely fashion. There is also the risk potentially of LCDC imposing a stay on development in the subject areas while we get that work done. I can say, and I should say, these are not theoretical risks. These are things that I have, in fact, litigated in my previous employment with my previous employer as their land use attorney.
Thank you. And that last...
All of those.
Yeah, but that last one is distinctly different from someone taking it to LUBA to attempt to appeal the entire ordinance as it relates to the scope of risk to the county.
Yes. I will say that a lot of the same players, as in appellants and their lawyers, were involved with both. In some cases, when I was with Washington County, we would get an appeal to LUBA. LUBA would send it back. We would get a petition to LCDC. LCDC would say, get it done. We would enact an ordinance. There would be an appeal from that. And so it can go up and down between LUBA and LCDC multiple times. Potentially it did that essentially twice with Washington County. Some of those appeals went up to the Court of Appeals and one went up to the Supreme Court. So they can go in that way. In terms of how I would evaluate the risk of any particular ordinance being appealed and the risk of it being reversed and remanded to us from LUBA versus the risk of, say, LCDC setting a timeline and saying, get it done, and or the risk of a stay. It's very hard to gauge, to be honest. That's almost where I'm doing a bit of guesswork and trying to predict how outcomes, and that's real challenging for me to put any. If you put me in a corner and said percentage, I would have so many caveats on those percentages I wouldn't want you to rely upon.
That's fair, thank you. But in the case of LCDC and LUBA, that's those entities grappling with it, and not this board taking up time and staff time to try to work through something, perhaps at the expense of taking care of their business and other workload. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we would have attorney time. We would have an investment of time defending either the ordinance on appeal to LUBA or defending against an enforcement order or a stay. A stay gets really complicated because you're essentially telling people you can't do anything with their application while you try again on the ordinance, and you can imagine the angst that might come from that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Actually, just one clarification on one thing. My personal goal in this is to make it easier to build housing. And as I search for ways to do that, I had somebody recently ask me, why would somebody be opposed to building housing? And I said, well, there are myriad reasons that people might be opposed to building housing. If you can't, there are places you simply can't build tall, but for all kinds of reasons. So why would we want to impose greater regulation than is necessary? And that is my entire goal in looking deeply into this ordinance. And it's always my entire goal in how do we effectively enforce our land use, how do we write and enforce our land use codes. It's important that we all are on that same page. If not, then we're going to be at odds on a continual basis. And as you make presentations to me, I would request that you tell me that this will increase housing costs by such and such an amount, but it's necessary. This will slow down housing by such and such a time because it's necessary. Or the converse, this will not increase housing costs. This will not slow down the building of housing. That's what I want to hear, because to me, building the housing is the most important element. Getting front doors and understanding, as always, that we're not going to solve the problem of far too few houses available in Lane County outside of urban growth boundaries. But by doing what we can outside of urban growth boundaries, it allows us to focus on what we all desire, which is compact urban growth. Compact urban growth is greater achieved if we use outside of urban growth as strongly as we possibly can, pushing the envelope wherever necessary, and sometimes having appeals, and sometimes even losing appeals, because it's, in my estimation, it's better to allow more housing, not to lose the opportunity to build housing if it increases the amount, if it is offset by the appeal. So I would rather err toward building more than err toward being afraid of appeal.
Okay, well, I'll just say, actually, I completely agree with Commissioner Farr. And one of the things that in this presentation was, you mentioned it exceeds the scope of this project. But I think part of what, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Farr, part of what you've been trying to do is trying to expand the scope of this project a little bit. Maybe look into what vegetation could be clear and objective to remove. I mean, if those things are possible, I think we would like to see them on this ordinance. But we will continue this topic at a different time if everybody else is done, because we are way past time.
It'll be back next week.
So, all right, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it. We are going to move on to 7B, Mr. Mokreheiski, or do you guys want to take a break? Or go for it? 7B.
Well, I have a number of announcements, Chair, but I'm happy to hold them till next week. I don't think any of them are critical for today. You heard from Eve Gray on the youth crisis services. So I'm happy to hold till next week.
Okay. Move on to Commissioner business. 10A, any announcements?
I'm infuriated.
Commissioner comments and remonstrance? Committee reports? Any future board assignment requests? We got two.
Go ahead.
Go away.
Okay. My future assignment request is after budget time, maybe sometime this summer, we have the administrator look at the future productivity of our site across the street that is currently a parking lot. It was previously slated as where we were going to put a justice center. And now we have a new plan for what we are doing with the court system. And as a parking lot in downtown Eugene, it is easy to say that it is currently underutilized. And it would be nice to put our heads together and determine what we would like to see that space envisioned as in the future. So it's kind of broad. It doesn't have a short timeline, but it is something I think we need to look at for the benefit of the community.
I'm kind of surprised it hasn't come up in Facilities Planning Committee. But I suppose we've been a little busy with.
Because we were waiting till we resolved with the purchase of 99
Yeah.
to solve the courthouse space problem, I think, so.
$10 million water
Great.
tank we're replacing, yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice to get that on the people's purview for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Official.
Yeah, I've been asked by some of my transportation and trucking people to ask the board if they would be willing to write a letter opposing the gas vehicle transit registration fee increase tax, the Measure 120 on the upcoming primary ballot. So I'm going to put that out on my colleagues if you're interested in joining me in writing a letter opposing that.
Is this for like the media or just a press release or?
I don't know, I hadn't thought that through. Good question.
Is it on a ballot measure?
Yeah, about Measure 120, which is the gas tax, vehicle tax, the transit, and the registration fee increase for ODOT.
Personally, I generally, when it's a citizens initiative, or, it's a ballot initiative, the citizens are the legislators, and I like to let them legislate, and as individual commissioners in our own ways and spaces, if we want to weigh in. I don't know that as a board, if that's what you're asking, a letter or a statement is something I could support.
Okay, just passing it on from my constituents to the board, so am I seeing no?
I would like a little more information, but I would support that thought.
Well, it's quick. It's like 40 days away, so.
It is.
Yeah.
Individual commission, I mean, I've certainly waited just as an individual elected official on kinds of issues in the community, but not as a.
No worries, thanks for your input.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe we have one.
Yes, to look at the Pearl Street lot, and we'll add the Pearl Street parking lot to our list of assignments.
Okay, if that's it for everything, our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 14th. We are adjourned.